I don't have.
Here. That's yours.
That's mine. That's why.
I'm just taking your stuff. Yeah. I was how long phone before? She's the president. What's his name?
Yeah, but das. Distinguished representatives, I declare open the fourth plenary meeting. This afternoon, we will continue the consideration of Agenda Item 7, General Debate. States are invited in accordance with Rule 50 of the Rules of Procedure of the Assembly to deliver statements of no longer than 5 minutes. In order to assist the speakers with the timely delivery of their statements, a light mechanism was installed at the lectern. In order to accommodate all speakers, this time limit shall be strictly observed. As indicated this morning, written or pre-recorded statements submitted in lieu of in-person statements as of yesterday will be posted on the respective webpage of the Assembly. I would invite delegations to please check the list of speakers dated 2nd of December 25 at 13 hours 15, available at the conference officer's desk, as there have been multiple changes. Let us proceed immediately with our first speaker. We have Central African Republic, Sa Excellence Madame Sylvie Paille-Poutemon, ministre des Affaires étrangères. Vous avez la parole.
Merci, Madame la Présidente de séance. Madame la Présidente de séance, Madame la Présidente de la Cour pénale internationale, Excellences, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres et chefs de délégation des États parties, Excellents Mesdames et Messieurs les ambassadeurs représentants des organisations internationales, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants des agences du système des Nations Unies et de l'Union africaine, Mesdames et Messieurs les experts et membres de l'organisation de la société civile, distinguées personnalités, Mesdames et Messieurs. C'est pour moi un honneur de prendre la parole au nom de la République centrafricaine, mon pays, en l'occasion de cette session, de cette 24e session de l'Assemblée des États parties au statut de Rome. Je tiens tout d'abord à exprimer la gratitude de mon pays à la présidence de l'Assemblée, au secrétariat ainsi qu'à la Cour pénale internationale pour l'organisation de cette rencontre essentielle au renforcement de la justice internationale et à la consolidation de l'état de droit. Mesdames et Messieurs, depuis son adhésion au statut de Rome, la République centrafricaine demeure fermement attachée aux principes fondateurs de la Cour pénale internationale. La lutte contre l'impunité, la protection des victimes, la promotion d'une paix durable et le respect universel des droits humains. Mon pays, qui a connu des crises ayant profondément affecté son tissu social, sait mieux que quiconque l'importance d'une justice indépendante, impartiale et accessible. C'est pourquoi nous avons coopéré pleinement avec la Cour pénale internationale dans le cadre des situations ouvertes en République centrafricaine. Il m'est important de rappeler ici que mon pays est non seulement un des États parties au dit statut de Rome, mais surtout un pays de situation qui collabore efficacement avec la Cour pénale internationale pour l'exécution des mandats. À titre d'illustration, parmi les 6 prisonniers de la CPI, de la Cour pénale internationale, 3 sont de nationalité centrafricaine. Et la République centrafricaine a exécuté plusieurs mandats de la Cour, pour citer, par exemple, Dominique Oguen, Ali Kouchab, pour ne citer que cela. D'autre part, désireuse de lutter contre l'impunité, la République centrafricaine a créé, avec l'appui de la communauté internationale, la Cour pénale spéciale, juridiction hybride composée de magistrats internationaux et nationaux qui répond aux préoccupations de la population centrafricaine en général et pour une justice de proximité, proche des communautés affectées et aux attentes des victimes et témoins en particulier. Des efforts reconnus de par le fait que le bureau du procureur et la chambre préliminaire de la Cour pénale internationale ont décliné leur intention de ne plus s'occuper de la situation en République centrafricaine. Une décision motivée par la volonté des autorités centrafricaines et la capacité de celles-ci de poursuivre et juger tous les crimes commis sur le territoire national, ainsi que le bon fonctionnement des sessions criminelles dans les différentes cours d'appel, sans occulter la montée en puissance de la Cour pénale spéciale qui, en dépit des ressources humaines et financières limitées, a répondu en peu de temps aux préoccupations de la population, tendant à lutter efficacement contre l'impunité et aux attentes des victimes et des témoins. Mesdames et Messieurs, la République centrafricaine s'est engagée dans un vaste processus de réforme institutionnelle, judiciaire et sécuritaire, ayant permis des avancées nationales en matière de justice et de réconciliation. Pour exemple, le renforcement de la Cour pénale spéciale, CPS, la réhabilitation progressive de l'appareil judiciaire au niveau national, l'intensification des programmes de vérité, réparation et réconciliation, et la lutte accrue contre les violences sexuelles basées sur le genre. Des efforts parfois menés dans un contexte de fragilité extrême, qui témoignent de notre détermination à offrir aux Centrafricains une justice pleinement souveraine, cela en complémentarité de l'action de la Cour pénale internationale. Mesdames et Messieurs, la lutte contre l'impunité ne peut être effective sans solidarité internationale, ni sans un engagement durable en faveur du relèvement institutionnel. Nous appelons la communauté internationale à renforcer son appui aux pays affectés par les conflits, notamment par la mobilisation des ressources financières adaptées aux réalités du terrain, le renforcement des capacités nationales en matière de justice, d'enquête et de poursuite, le soutien à la protection des victimes, des témoins et des défenseurs des droits humains, et l'appui à la réinsertion des jeunes dans les communautés affectées. La République centrafricaine réaffirme sa conviction à une paix durable qui passe par la justice et une justice efficace qui exige une coopération internationale renforcée. Nous soutenons les efforts entrepris et encourageons les États à bâtir un système de justice réellement universel, sans double standard. Pour cela, nous recommandons d'améliorer le fonctionnement de la Cour, de réduire la durée des procédures, de renforcer l'équilibre entre les droits des victimes et ceux de la défense, et d'assurer l'universalité du statut de Rome. Les victimes demeurent au cœur du statut de Rome, et cela, notre gouvernement le salue. Il salue en particulier l'action du Fonds au profit des victimes, les programmes de réparation et les initiatives visant à restaurer la dignité des survivants. Nous exprimons notre gratitude aux États donateurs et appelons à un renforcement des ressources destinées aux victimes, notamment dans les contextes les plus vulnérables. Permettez-moi, Mesdames et Messieurs, de conclure en vous disant ceci. La République centrafricaine réaffirme ici son engagement absolu en faveur d'une justice internationale, de la lutte contre l'impunité et de la construction d'une paix durable pour son peuple et pour l'humanité tout entière. Nous demeurons convaincus qu'ensemble, États, institutions judiciaires, organisations régionales, sociétés civiles et partenaires internationaux, que nous pouvons bâtir un monde où la dignité humaine est pleinement respectée et protégée. Je vous remercie de votre aimable attention.
Je vous remercie. And the next speaker will be Her Excellency Madame Nyeri Wachira, Senior Deputy Solicitor General and Head of International Law Division Office of Kenya. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Excellencies, heads of delegation, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. The Kenya delegation is honored to participate in this 24th session of the Assembly of States Parties to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. The International Criminal Court was established as a beacon of hope as part of a world order that sought higher human ideals to end impunity for the perpetrators of crimes of concern to the international community. By dint of the Rome Statute, the community of nations also sought a court of last resort, a court that would investigate and prosecute individuals when national systems fail to hold perpetrators accountable and deter future crimes. As part of this criminal justice system, Every state has a solemn duty to establish a mechanism of first instance to deal with international crimes whenever they arise within their jurisdiction. In affirmation of this global quest to entrench accountability for the most egregious international crimes, Kenya acceded to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court on the 11th of August, 1999, and ratified it on 15th March, 2005. As the contours of the global order are getting redefined, Kenya today reaffirms its continued support for the independence, impartiality, and integrity of the ICC, which is a vital pillar of international justice. We do so well aware that the principles of cooperation and complementarity underpin the success of this arc of the international criminal justice system. Madam President, Excellencies, at the heart of any international justice system is the imperative to secure justice for the victims. In that accord, witness protection becomes one of the most consequential levers in international justice because it enables witnesses and victims of crime, especially of those cases involving crimes against the Rome Statute, to testify safely without fear of retaliation, thereby securing evidence needed for successful prosecutions. Effective protection of witnesses is essential to make the wheels of justice spin faster, as witness testimonies are vital for uncovering the truth, particularly in complex transnational cases where traditional investigations may be challenging. Over the years, Kenya has continued to reform its criminal justice system and strengthen its domestic capacity to investigate, prosecute, and adjudicate international crimes. In this context, we continue to advance witness protection frameworks, mutual legal assistance tools, and complementary legislation to ensure that accountability is not merely an aspirational tenet, but an achievable goal. Our efforts reflect the central principle of complementarity, a cornerstone of the Rome Statute, and Kenya calls on states to embrace the continued partnership between the court and national jurisdictions to make this principle meaningful in practice. In this regard, Kenya just last week hosted the Africa Conference of the Witness Protection Agencies from the 26th to 27th November 2025 in Nairobi. This conference underscored the necessity of witness protection agencies from different African countries working together to realize our shared aspiration of strengthening the criminal justice systems in our respective countries through enhanced, robust witness protection systems. Madam President, on the matter of financing, Kenya appreciates that the International Criminal Court continues to operate in an increasingly constrained financial environment. Kenya acknowledges the growing workload, the rising complexity of situations, and the operational pressures placed upon the court. In this regard, sustainable and predictable financing remains critical to maintaining the court's independence and integrity. Kenya therefore supports a budgetary approach that prioritizes essential activities, ensures value for money, and maintains a balanced, sustainable, and fair burden-sharing arrangement among states parties. We also encourage continued adherence to established financial regulations to ensure prudent utilization of resources. Kenya also notes with appreciation the continued expansion of voluntary funding streams and special purpose trust funds to the court, and is confident that the funds will be also utilized within the established financial framework to ensure transparency and achievement of the court's long-term strategic priorities. Strengthening oversight in this area will reinforce confidence among all states parties. Madam President, Excellencies, Kenya notes with appreciation that some of the internal challenges that the ICC is facing are being addressed by the Bureau of the Assembly, and hopes that the reforms and internal processes are completed in a fair and transparent manner to ensure and protect the integrity and smooth functioning of the court. Kenya also reiterates the urgent need to finalize the reform of the Bureau of the Assembly of States Parties to ensure equitable geographical representation based on the objective criteria established within the statute. With the increasing contribution of regional mechanisms in conflict resolution, as contemplated by Chapter 8 of the UN Charter, Kenya notes with appreciation the ongoing efforts aimed at intensifying dialogue with the African Union to strengthen the relationship between the Court and the African Union, and welcomes the Court's regular engagement with the African Union in this regard. In celebration of the solidarity within the community of nations, Kenya expresses her immense gratitude to all partner states for the support rendered in the election of Professor Phoebe Okowa as a judge for the International Court of Justice to fill a casual vacancy that arose in the court. I repeat again, it would be remiss of me not to thank all partner states who elected Professor Phoebe Okowa. And as the 2026 regular elections beckon, we call on the gracious support and consideration of all states in facilitating her transition to a full 9-year tenure. In conclusion, Kenya also pays tribute to the court and all staff members who often work under challenging circumstances to advance the cause of justice. Their dedication, together with the cooperation of states parties, remains the single and most important cog in the engine of the Rome Statute system. Kenya reaffirms that the fight against impunity is a shared responsibility. No single institution or state can discharge this mandate alone. Success requires a strengthened partnership between national systems, regional bodies, and the court. Kenya continues to advance this cause through cooperation, legislative innovation, and continued engagement with this assembly. Our collective unity is our strength, and our shared commitment to justice is the foundation of this institution. I thank you.
I thank you for your statement. Prochaine est Monsieur, Son Excellence Monsieur Skander Deskeli, l'ambassadeur de Tunisie aux Pays-Bas. Vous avez la parole.
Madame la Présidente, à l'occasion de la tenue de la 24e session de l'Assemblée des États parties au statut de Rome de la Cour pénale internationale, et au nom de la République tunisienne, j'ai l'honneur de vous adresser mes vifs remerciements pour tous les efforts déployés en matière de poursuite et de répression des crimes internationaux les plus graves. Votre engagement et votre action sont indispensables pour combattre l'impunité des auteurs de crimes de masse et rendre justice aux victimes et à leurs familles. Au-delà de la coopération avec la Cour, les États doivent agir et tout faire selon leurs moyens pour protéger notre Cour face aux menaces, aux intimidations et aux sanctions à son encontre. C'est pourquoi la Tunisie réitère son soutien constant et indéfectible à la Cour, tel que déjà exprimé dans la déclaration conjointe avec d'autres États le 7 février 2025, ainsi qu'à ses juges, à ses responsables élus et à tout son personnel, contre toute intimidation ou menace visant à entraver l'exercice de manière indépendante et impartiale de leurs fonctions. La Tunisie se félicite du fait d'honorer annuellement sa contribution financière au budget de la CPI. Elle appelle tous les États parties à en faire de même pour permettre à la Cour de pouvoir mener à bien toutes ses missions nécessaires à son bon fonctionnement. Nous souhaitons rappeler à cette occasion le respect des règles linguistiques prévues par le statut de Rome. Aujourd'hui, la Cour fait face à de grands défis. Nous voyons tous les jours des atrocités et des horreurs commises contre des populations civiles innocentes dans plusieurs endroits de la planète. La Cour demeure le pilier et l'instrument fondamental de la justice pénale internationale, un outil essentiel pour la promotion de la paix et de la sécurité. C'est pourquoi la Tunisie appelle de ses vœux à l'universalité du statut de Rome. Le gouvernement tunisien se félicite également des avancements enregistrés dans les enquêtes sur la situation dans les pays concernés par les crimes internationaux. Je voudrais aussi évoquer l'étroite coordination entre la Cour et les différentes institutions tunisiennes dans le cadre du respect et de la mise en œuvre du principe de coopération qui demeure primordial pour le travail de la Cour. La Tunisie a exprimé sa satisfaction au moment de l'accord obtenu pour un cessez-le-feu à Gaza, après 2 années de crimes de génocide ayant provoqué une catastrophe humanitaire sans précédent. La conclusion d'un accord de cessez-le-feu ne doit pas empêcher la poursuite des responsables de l'entité occupante afin de les traduire en justice pour les crimes et les actes de répression collective qu'ils ont commis. Le gouvernement tunisien condamne avec la plus grande fermeté le fait que ces derniers continuent de tuer des civils palestiniens innocents, en toute impunité, malgré la conclusion de l'accord. Mesdames et Messieurs, permettez-moi pour terminer de saluer les différents organes juridictionnels et administratifs de la Cour pénale internationale, ainsi que les groupes de travail relevant de l'Assemblée des États parties pour leur engagement indéfectible en vue de réaliser la justice internationale, préserver la mémoire nationale et pour le soutien aux victimes. Merci de votre attention.
Je vous remercie. And the next speaker will be Ms. Lucia Garcia Rico, Director General for the United Nations International Organizations and Human Rights at the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Spain. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Excelencias, jefes de delegación, distinguidos delegados. Es para mí un honor intervenir en nombre de España en esta Asamblea de Estados partes del Estatuto de Roma. Mi país se alinea con la intervención de la Unión Europea. España está firmemente comprometida con la Corte Penal Internacional como pilar fundamental del sistema de justicia penal internacional y del orden multilateral basado en el derecho internacional. Este compromiso parte de nuestra firme convicción en la vigencia del sistema multilateral basado en el derecho internacional, incluido el derecho internacional de los derechos humanos y el derecho internacional humanitario, que defendemos de forma coherente y consistente. Señora presidenta, nos hallamos en un momento de grandes desafíos al multilateralismo y al derecho internacional, ante el que los Estados miembros de esta Asamblea debemos responder de forma unida. España defiende la independencia, la imparcialidad y la integridad de la Corte Penal Internacional ante las medidas de presión contra la institución, sus funcionarios y su personal, y contra aquellos que cooperan con ella, así como frente a cualquier medida que socave el ejercicio de su mandato y pueda debilitar sus principios fundacionales. La labor de la Corte es fundamental para luchar contra la impunidad por crímenes internacionales y como fuente de justicia para las víctimas que los han sufrido. Son ejemplos de ello la reciente intervención realizada por la fiscal adjunta Khan ante el Consejo de Seguridad de las Naciones Unidas sobre los progresos en la situación en Libia, que permitirán avanzar hacia el primer juicio ante la Corte en esta situación, así como la sentencia en el caso contra Ali Muhammad Ali Abd al-Rahman, del 6 de octubre por la Comisión de Crímenes de Guerra y Crímenes contra la Humanidad en Darfur, en la que por primera vez una declaración de culpabilidad contempla la persecución por motivos de género. Señora presidenta, junto con el firme respaldo político, España contribuye con recursos financieros a la Corte para que pueda desarrollar su labor. Desde 2022 hemos realizado contribuciones voluntarias por valor de 10 millones de euros, incluido un desembolso este año por un total de 1.100.000 euros, de los que 500.000 han sido asignados al Fondo Fiduciario de la Fiscalía, 300.000 para el Fondo Fiduciario de Complementariedad y 300.000 para el Fondo Fiduciario en beneficio de las víctimas. Adicionalmente, en línea con nuestro apoyo al multilingüismo como elemento indispensable del multilateralismo, este año hemos hecho una contribución de 50.000 euros para la traducción de jurisprudencia de la Corte al español. Este año también hemos avanzado en el refuerzo de la cooperación entre España y la Corte, con la reciente entrada en vigor del acuerdo bilateral relativo a la ejecución de las penas, así como el reciente depósito de ratificación de las enmiendas al artículo 8.2 del Estatuto de Roma. Asimismo, como muestra de respaldo a la labor de la Corte, tengo el honor de anunciar que España presentará la candidatura de la doctora Ana Peiró Llopis al puesto de jueza de la Corte Penal Internacional para el periodo 2027-2036. Señora presidenta, hacemos un llamamiento a todos los Estados parte a respetar los compromisos adquiridos en virtud del Estatuto de Roma incluidas las órdenes de arresto emitidas por la Corte. Ignorar estas órdenes erosiona la confianza en el sistema de justicia penal internacional al que todos nos debemos. También hacemos un llamamiento a avanzar en la homologación del crimen de agresión con el resto de crímenes contenidos en el Estatuto. Animamos a todos los Estados parte a ratificar las enmiendas de Kampala y a participar en el ejercicio de revisión previsto para 2029, con el objetivo de conseguir dicha homologación. Señora presidenta, para concluir, quiero reiterar que España seguirá trabajando para defender la independencia, la imparcialidad y la integridad de la Corte Penal Internacional. También continuará promoviendo la universalización del Estatuto de Roma. La labor de la Corte y la defensa del sistema del que nos dotamos por el Estatuto de Roma es indispensable en la lucha contra la impunidad, la rendición de cuentas y la protección de las víctimas, elementos esenciales para la justicia, la paz y los derechos humanos. Muchas gracias.
I thank you for your statement, and I will now go floor to Her Excellency Ms. Ana Cristina Rodriguez Pineda, Ambassador of Guatemala to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta, excelencias, distinguidos delegados y representantes de la sociedad civil. Para Guatemala es un honor participar en este debate general y expresar nuestro reconocimiento a la presidencia, a los jueces, al señor secretario y a todo el personal de la Corte Penal Internacional por su liderazgo, especialmente en un contexto de crecientes tensiones y presiones externas sobre el sistema multilateral. Guatemala desea reiterar su apoyo absoluto a la independencia de la Corte y a la integridad de sus procesos judiciales, particularmente frente a las sanciones y a las medidas coercitivas que han afectado a los jueces y funcionarios electos. Asimismo, reconocemos el trabajo del secretario y su equipo, que con sumo profesionalismo han asegurado la continuidad de su trabajo judicial, han garantizado la protección de víctimas y testigos y han llevado adelante grandes esfuerzos por modernizar sistemas internos, fortalecer la digitalización y mejorar la seguridad informática. Señora presidenta, la Corte debe ser resiliente sin dejar de ser eficiente. Nos alienta que a pesar de los ataques en contra de las salas y la Fiscalía, la Corte no ha detenido su trabajo, sino que ha buscado ser más eficiente y rápida. Al respecto, cabe destacar el caso Yecatón en Gaizona, en el que la Sala deliberó en tan solo 6 meses, a pesar de la complejidad de la prueba, y procedió a unificar en una sola decisión el fallo y la condena. El otro proceso emblemático es el caso Abalraman, que representa la primera condena por persecución de género, la primera condena proveniente de la situación en Darfur y la primera condena contra una remisión del Consejo de Seguridad de las Naciones Unidas. También seguimos con atención el caso en contra del expresidente Rodrigo Duterte, incluyendo la reciente audiencia en la Cámara de Apelaciones que denegó la liberación provisional, lo cual demuestra que la Corte continúa actuando con rigor, imparcialidad y profesionalismo. Aún así, miles de víctimas continúan aguardando justicia. Persiste la comisión de delitos internacionales, graves violaciones de derechos humanos y violencia contra las mujeres y niñas. La Corte representa la esperanza de estas personas y esa esperanza solo puede sostenerse si los Estados parte cumplen sus obligaciones. En ese sentido, permítame, señora presidenta, aludir a 3 aspectos en los cuales los Estados parte deben fortalecer su apoyo a la Corte. Primero, con respecto a la falta de cooperación y ejecuciones fallidas. La cooperación sigue siendo el eje del funcionamiento de la Corte. Sin apoyo efectivo de los Estados en la ejecución de órdenes de arresto, la protección de testigos o la coordinación de entregas de aprehendidos, la capacidad de la Corte para combatir la impunidad se ve limitada. Cada vez que un Estado deja de arrestar a individuos señalados de cometer delitos internacionales, se producen una serie de consecuencias negativas. No solo se debilita el Estado de Derecho, sino que se fomenta la reincidencia, se evidencia el doble rasero y se socava la legitimidad del sistema judicial. Guatemala continuará fortaleciendo sus mecanismos nacionales, hace un llamado a los Estados parte para observar plenamente sus compromisos y reitera la importancia de la promulgación de legislación de implementación, la adhesión a la Convención de Privilegios e Inmunidades y la adopción de acuerdos de cooperación según corresponda. Segundo, con respecto a la promoción de la universalidad, existe ahora una doble carga para los Estados parte. Por un lado, debemos seguir promoviendo la universalidad del Estatuto de Roma para consolidar un marco normativo global y uniforme contra la impunidad por los delitos más graves. Necesitamos más Estados comprometidos con los principios y propósitos adoptados en Roma en 1998. Por el otro, debemos hacer más para evitar denuncias al Estatuto de Roma. Abandonar la Corte Penal Internacional es una acción soberana de los Estados, pero no otorga permiso para minar el Estatuto de Roma o para cometer delitos graves. Este instrumento no es un mero tratado, sino constituye un sistema multilateral de justicia, de asistencia internacional, de refuerzo de capacidades nacionales. Guatemala le apuesta a la universalidad, a la diversidad y al multilingüismo para lograr una justicia más efectiva. Tercero, con respecto a la buena gobernanza y rendición de cuentas, la felicitamos a usted, Presidenta, y a los Estados parte por el trabajo durante el último año. Se han tomado medidas importantes para fortalecer su papel de supervisión y gestión de los diferentes órganos. Nos sigue preocupando la cultura laboral y el bienestar del personal de la Corte. Para ello, es indispensable continuar reforzando los procesos internos para asegurar que la Corte esté a la altura de su política de tolerancia cero ante la discriminación, el acoso y el abuso de autoridad con transparencia e imparcialidad. Señora Presidenta, Guatemala mantiene un compromiso constante y duradero con la Corte Penal Internacional y con la defensa de un orden internacional basado en el derecho. La Corte puede contar con Guatemala para fortalecer la cooperación, proteger la independencia judicial y promover un sistema capaz de responder con firmeza a los delitos más graves. Condenamos enérgicamente cualquier tipo de amenaza, ataque o presión hacia la Corte, sus jueces, funcionarios o quienes colaboran con ella. En estos tiempos de desafío, tanto nuestra unión como nuestro apoyo político y diplomático son más esenciales que nunca. Muchas gracias.
I thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is His Excellency Mr. Augusto Massari, Ambassador of Italy to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Madam President, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I'm honored to address the Assembly of the State Parties of the ICC on behalf of the Italian Republic. Italy associates itself with the statement delivered by Denmark as Presidency of the European Union. Madam President, Italy has been a strong supporter of the International Criminal Court since its very creation. It is not a coincidence that the founding treaty of the court was signed in Rome. Our nation is proud that we have given a significant contribution to the advancement of the international criminal law. Under the current geopolitical situation, characterized by coercive measures as well as cyber attacks, Italy reiterates its support to the court. We deem it essential to preserve its resilience and capacity to effectively pursue its institutional mandate. Madam President, we are the fifth largest contributor to the budget of the ICC. Responding to the call from the Court in 2025, we disbursed our national financial contribution already in January to respond to its urgent needs. This year, too, the Court has made a similar request for our national contribution, and we will do so to meet the needs of the ICC. In addition to financial contributions, we are also supporting the Court by having an active role as member of the Bureau, by seconding personnel to the ICC, and by providing training sessions on finance investigation to the personnel of the Office of the Prosecutor, offered by our financial policies, Guardia di Finanza. Italy also supports the Court's investigative efforts, including through the active contribution of the Italian Europol and Eurojust desks to joint investigation teams and other coordinated evidence-gathering activities. Italy, together with other partners and allies, recognizes the relevance of an open, constructive dialogue with non-state parties to prevent further coercive measures and in order to ensure that the Court continues to be effective, sustainable, independent, and impartial as judicial institution. At the entrance of the ICC building, there is an inscription that says, "Building a more just world." While the world may not be just yet, Italy believes in the importance of keeping this process alive. What we have achieved 27 years ago with the Rome Statute is a historical milestone. That is why we need to protect that process launched in Rome. The Court is still a relatively young institution, but we must not understate the results that it has achieved and the effect of deterrence against committing international crimes it provides. Madam President, beyond external threats, the ICC also faces several internal challenges. We acknowledge that a constructive discussion within the ASP membership may help find appropriate ways to strengthen the Court, ensure its resilience, and provide for more effective tools to respond to such challenges. From this point of view, positive results have already been achieved, such as the review of the procedures for internal oversight. We encourage the ASP to pursue a constructive, pragmatic, and result-oriented approach with respect to any other challenge that may be identified, with a view to finding solutions that make the Court stronger and more effective. Addressing these topics openly is not about retreating from the Court's mandate, nor about renegotiating its foundations. Rather, it is about building the conditions for a future in which the Court can operate on a truly universal basis, grounded in broader acceptance and deeper engagement by all states. Madam President, Italy strongly believes in the Court's activities aimed at defending the rights of the victims of the most terrible crimes committed across the world. In this regard, in line with our past commitments, also in 2025, we decided to continue our support for the Trust Fund for Victims with a regular voluntary contribution that we have recently finalized. Finally, Madam President, Italy congratulates you and the Secretariat of the ASP for your engagement in conducting our work these days. I thank you for your attention, Madam Chair.
I thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is Mr. Alexander Kacic, Chief Legal Advisor of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Serbia. You have the floor.
Madam President, members of the Court, distinguished delegates. On behalf of the Republic of Serbia, I would like to emphasize the fundamental importance of strict adherence to the principles and rules of international law governing the jurisdiction and powers of the international courts and tribunals. The International Criminal Court is not yet a court of universal jurisdiction, and its effectiveness and reach depend on the willingness of states to cooperate and accept its jurisdiction. The credibility and effectiveness of international criminal justice depend on strict adherence to the Rome Statute and the rules of customary international law, particularly those concerning the exercise of jurisdiction. In this context, it is necessary to underline that, in order to build trust in the International Criminal Court, the court and its state parties must, inter alia, strictly respect the immunities of non-state parties and their officials in accordance with Article 98 of the Rome Statute. The issuance of confidential arrest warrants against officials of non-state parties, which are then disclosed at press conferences, undermines the credibility of the International Criminal Court. Appeals for unity and full support for the work of the International Criminal Court are meaningful only if the policy of the prosecutor is based on the principle of political neutrality and the strict respect of the Rome Statute and international law. The prosecutor of the International Criminal Court holds powers unprecedented in the history of international administration of justice, and these powers must be exercised in accordance with the principles of sound administration of justice. The experience of the Republic of Serbia clearly shows that international criminal justice can function properly only when jurisdictional boundaries are strictly observed. Otherwise, it can be perceived only as a political tool delivering injustice or selective justice. When the proper boundaries of jurisdiction and its exercise are disregarded, the judiciary became politicized, undermining the credibility of the judicial institution. We must be mindful of the fact that establishment and preservation of the integrity, dignity, and credibility of international criminal justice is our common goal, and that all of us must yield to this goal, regardless of the political effect. Only in this way we can contribute to strengthening the still fragile system of international criminal justice and build the International Criminal Court that would be capable of contributing to the preservation of the international peace and security and achievements of other purposes and goals of the Charter of the United Nations. Thanks for your attention.
I thank you for your statement, and I will now give floor to His Excellency Mr. Hector Constant Rosales, Ambassador, Permanent Representative to the OPCW, ICC, and other international organizations and courts of Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. You have the floor.
Gracias, señora Presidenta. Señora Presidenta, Excelencias, distinguidos delegados. Venimos hoy a esta asamblea en nombre del pueblo y del gobierno de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela, presidido por el presidente constitucional Nicolás Maduro Moros. Venimos a alertar y condenar las acciones hegemónicas contra mi nación, hoy amenazada por un despliegue militar estadounidense sin precedentes en el Mar Caribe, que pone en riesgo a una región amante de la paz. Pero venimos también con la responsabilidad histórica de reconocer las alarmas que se presentan ante un panorama sombrío, ante una deuda moral, jurídica y humana que se ha acumulado durante décadas contra el heroico pueblo palestino. Estamos aquí para exigir que se mire de frente la dimensión del horror, la impunidad y la complicidad que están destruyendo la credibilidad del sistema internacional de justicia. 8 décadas después de los juicios de Nuremberg, la humanidad vuelve a encontrarse frente a un momento que pone a prueba la credibilidad del derecho penal internacional. En 1945 el mundo reconoció que no podía permitir que el poder militar, político o económico neutralizara a la justicia. Se afirmó entonces que los crímenes más graves no podían quedar a merced de equilibrios geopolíticos ni de conveniencias diplomáticas. Ese principio que debería sostener todo el edificio institucional de la Corte Penal Internacional es precisamente el que hoy se ve amenazado a partir de un lamentable retorno a la amenaza y la coerción. Hoy enfrentamos una de las crisis más profundas desde que se fundó este sistema. No se trata solo de la magnitud de los crímenes en curso, sino del riesgo real de que las reglas básicas del derecho internacional se desmoronen ante nuestros ojos. El ejemplo de Palestina es estruendoso. No hablamos de un episodio aislado, sino de un proceso continuo de destrucción masiva dirigido contra una población civil atrapada sin vías de escape, sometida a bombardeos que han arrasado barrios completos, infraestructura vital, hospitales, escuelas y refugios. La responsabilidad de estos hechos no es abstracta, tiene nombres claros. El régimen sionista de Israel, sus altos mandos, son quienes han diseñado, autorizado y ejecutado esta operación militar que castiga colectivamente a un pueblo entero, por lo que deben ser sometidos a los mecanismos de responsabilidad penal internacional. No existe interpretación jurídica que convierta en aceptable el bloqueo deliberado de acceso a alimentos, medicinas, electricidad y agua a millones de personas. No existe argumento que pueda disimular el patrón de ataques dirigidos contra objetivos civiles. Ningún Estado tiene derecho a ejecutar operaciones militares ilegales con impunidad y ningún líder tiene derecho a dirigirlas sin enfrentar las consecuencias jurídicas que derivan de ella. La Corte Penal Internacional fue creada justamente para actuar en circunstancias como estas, cuando la magnitud del daño exige una respuesta institucional firme. Sin embargo, lo que observamos es una Corte que se ve forzada a calcular cada paso porque sobre ella pesa un clima de intimidación sin precedentes. Ese clima es producto directo de sanciones, amenazas y presiones políticas dirigidas contra la Fiscalía y contra magistrados con el objetivo claro de impedirles actuar con la determinación que se exige. Estimados colegas, Venezuela sabe lo que significan las sanciones como instrumento de coerción y chantaje político, incluso a costa del sufrimiento de la población. Por eso hablamos con autoridad cuando decimos que ninguna institución que aspire a ser un pilar de la justicia internacional puede permitir que sus decisiones se condicionen por represalias externas. La Corte no puede quedarse con discursos y declaraciones de solidaridad frente a las negativas consecuencias de las medidas coercitivas unilaterales. Es necesario un pronunciamiento claro de sus distintos órganos que determine el carácter punible de esas medidas y establezca las responsabilidades del caso, tal como lo ha venido exigiendo nuestro país en el caso Venezuela II, remitido a la Corte hace casi 6 años. Respecto del asunto conocido como Venezuela I, que ratificamos como un proceso que responde a la instrumentalización política de la justicia internacional, deseamos reiterar que como Estado soberano, Venezuela tiene el derecho a llevar a cabo sus propios procesos penales sin injerencias externas en consonancia con el Estatuto de Roma, el cual consagra el carácter complementario de la Corte. Recibimos asimismo con sorpresa el anuncio del cierre de la oficina de la Fiscalía en Caracas, lo cual, sin embargo, no influirá en el espíritu de cooperación de mi país. Señora Presidenta, la Corte debe dejar de permitir que la justicia se convierta en un arma de dominación selectiva, manteniendo un doble rasero que es intolerable. Sirve a los poderosos y castiga a los que luchan por su soberanía, libertad e independencia. Venezuela cree en el derecho internacional, cree en la justicia, cree en la validez histórica de Nuremberg. Y precisamente porque creemos en eso, no renunciamos a la esencia de la justicia, que es la base fundamental de la paz. Por ello, mi país continuará reivindicando el legado histórico de nuestros libertadores y libertadoras y la vigencia del pensamiento del gran Simón Bolívar, quien proclamó, cito, «La paz será mi puerto, mi gloria, mi recompensa, mi esperanza, mi dicha y todo cuanto me es precioso en este mundo». Muchas gracias, señora Presidenta.
Thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is Ms. Fabiola Cruz Moreno, Legal Advisor, Second Secretary, Embassy of the Plurinational State of Bolivia to the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Señora Presidenta, señores representantes de los Estados parte del Estatuto de Roma, representantes de la sociedad civil, estimados y estimadas delegados. En nombre del Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia, tenemos el honor de participar en la 24ª Asamblea de los Estados Partes del Estatuto de Roma. En esta ocasión, transmitimos un saludo fraternal de parte del presidente constitucionalmente electo, Rodrigo Paz Pereira, y del nuevo gobierno, que impulsa una renovada política exterior basada en el derecho internacional, la paz, la cooperación multilateral, responsable y orientada a resultados, la defensa de los derechos humanos y la promoción de la dignidad humana como fundamento del orden global. En el contexto internacional actual, marcado por tensiones geopolíticas y desafíos crecientes al derecho internacional humanitario, una Corte fuerte, independiente y universal, guiada por los principios del Estatuto de Roma, es esencial para proteger la dignidad humana y combatir la impunidad. Bolivia, Estado negociador del Estatuto de Roma, lo ratificó el 2002, ha ratificado la enmienda sobre el crimen de agresión el 2020, además de ratificar la enmienda del artículo 8 del Estatuto de Roma, que incorpora nuevos actos que constituyen crímenes. Bolivia también ha ratificado el acuerdo sobre privilegios e inmunidades de la Corte Penal Internacional el 2006. Bolivia reconoce y valora profundamente el trabajo de la Corte Penal Internacional en su función de investigar y juzgar los crímenes más graves que afectan a la comunidad internacional, como son el genocidio, crímenes de lesa humanidad, crímenes de guerra y crímenes de agresión. Asimismo, expresamos nuestro reconocimiento a los esfuerzos institucionales realizados por la Corte para fortalecer la independencia judicial y garantizar el funcionamiento eficiente de la Corte, así como la organización de esta Asamblea. Al ser un esfuerzo de todos los Estados partes y respetuosos del orden jurídico internacional, el Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia ratifica su compromiso con el derecho penal internacional expresado mediante su consentimiento a los principales instrumentos en esta materia y su cooperación con la Corte. A la vez, hacemos un llamado a poner en práctica mecanismos efectivos de prevención, protección y defensa del Estatuto de Roma. El gobierno actual prioriza la reforma y la armonización del orden jurídico interno con el fin de fortalecer las capacidades nacionales para prevenir, investigar y sancionar crímenes internacionales bajo el principio de complementariedad. Valoramos la cooperación técnica que la Corte puede ofrecer como un elemento fundamental para contribuir con este proceso. Bolivia, pese a los retos económicos que enfrenta y las reformas económicas necesarias adoptadas por el gobierno actual, reconoce la importancia del adecuado soporte financiero para el programa del presupuesto de la Corte como un elemento indispensable para alcanzar los objetivos y propósitos del Estatuto de manera plena. La delegación saluda las medidas adoptadas por la Corte en materia de eficiencia y austeridad y alentamos la continuidad de tales esfuerzos. A su vez, Bolivia remarca la importancia de enfatizar los esfuerzos en los principios de complementariedad y representación geográfica, así como la necesidad de preservar la diversidad, el multilingüismo y la equidad de género, además de la importancia de enfatizar los esfuerzos en mejorar el ambiente laboral de la Corte. El Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia, como Estado pacifista y comprometido con el Estado de Derecho Internacional, sostiene la relevancia de la creación de la Corte Penal Internacional y su rol crucial para luchar contra la impunidad. Hacemos un llamado a la Corte a continuar con los procesos de investigación de manera independiente e imparcial para que estos crímenes sean juzgados y a los Estados partes o a terceros estados a prevenir, evitar y prevenir cualquier intento de socapar la integridad de la Corte y de sus funcionarios. En este sentido, destacamos la necesidad de fortalecer el diálogo y la coordinación diplomática ante actos dirigidos contra la Corte, sus funcionarios y personas que colaboran con ella, así como consolidar marcos jurídicos nacionales que garanticen los privilegios e inmunidades previstos en el Estatuto de Roma y en el Acuerdo sobre la materia. Presidente y representantes de los Estados partes del Estatuto de Roma, Concluyo reafirmando el compromiso del Estado Plurinacional de Bolivia con el fortalecimiento del orden jurídico internacional, con el trabajo de la Corte Penal Internacional para asegurar el acceso universal a la justicia penal internacional. Invitamos respetuosamente a los Estados a continuar apoyando y consolidando el sistema del Estatuto de Roma mediante la cooperación efectiva, el compromiso sostenido y el fortalecimiento de la Corte. Gracias.
Thank you for your statement. Et maintenant, je donne la parole au Monsieur Taylor Lupanga, chargé de mission du chef d'État de la République démocratique du Congo. Vous avez la parole.
Excellence Prévé Kokourante, président de l'Assemblée des États partis, Honorable Tomoko Akane, présidente de la Cour pénale internationale, Honorable Mamemandiaï Niang, procureur adjoint de la Cour pénale internationale, Madame Nazet Chemam Khan, présidente de la Cour, procureur adjointe de la Cour internationale, Monsieur Gilles Oswaldo, greffier, Mesdames et Messieurs, les délégués. La RDC se tient en ce moment sur la liste des États qui ont reconnu la qualité du travail, le rapport à l'été desquels, au soutien desquels, les présents travaux sont en déroulement. C'est aussi l'occasion qui nous est offerte de pouvoir féliciter la conduite des travaux. La 24e session de l'Assemblée des États partis, qui se poursuit en ce jour, intervient dans un contexte d'une multiplicité de crises, les crises humanitaires à travers le monde, les sanctions dirigées contre les responsables de la Cour, mais également et surtout la situation aujourd'hui de révision des statuts de Rome. Plusieurs cataclysmes, comme nous l'avons dit, secouent l'humanité, les agressions, les rébellions, les crises environnementales, occasionnant des déplacements, de réfugiés et perturbant la paix mondiale. Pour compléter ce chapitre, je ne saurais passer sous silence la crise à l'est de la RDC avec son génocide et puis encore l'agression dont le Rwanda est reconnu auteur par la résolution 2373 du Conseil de sécurité des Nations Unies. Il n'est pas anodin, à la suite de plusieurs analystes et pris d'esprit de justice, de parler d'une catastrophe humanitaire ignorée. La somme de ces crises convainc de l'utilité du mandat de la Cour pénale internationale, à savoir lutter pour la justice et lutter contre l'impunité des crimes les plus graves. Il va sans dire, mais demeurant cependant vrai, que le mandat de la Cour est plus qu'important en ces temps difficiles. Il mérite, ce mandat, d'être accompagné par tous les acteurs face à la montée incontrôlée des violences aux conséquences humanitaires dramatiques. Il est nécessaire pour tous les acteurs de préserver l'universalité de la Cour à travers la coopération et la complémentarité qui sont des piliers essentiels de la Cour pénale internationale. L'on constate que la Cour ne pourra accomplir ce mandat aisément dans un contexte où ses principaux responsables sont sous sanction. Et c'est l'occasion pour la RDC de plaider en faveur de la levée des sanctions qui visent les élus et les responsables de la Cour pénale internationale. En plus de soutenir le personnel et les responsables sous sanction, la RDC invite la Cour à mener les dialogues. Les dialogues avec ses partenaires multilatéraux et bilatéraux qui contribueraient au rétablissement de la confiance, mais également préserveraient l'indépendance de cette juridiction à vocation universelle. La RDC est témoin du dynamisme de la Cour. En ce moment où il se passe mille et une choses dans sa partie orientale, où l'agression rwandaise, les troupes, les groupes armés font loi, c'est l'occasion ici de reconnaître ce dynamisme au travers des enquêtes. Les enquêtes actuellement en cours. Cependant, le temps apparemment long que prennent les enquêtes est certes frustrant à certains égards, mais en considération de l'urgence dictée par la gravité il est nécessaire de rappeler la nécessité pour le bureau du procureur à accélérer ses enquêtes de manière à permettre aux victimes d'avoir la justice. Le professeur Célestin Hiller enseigne que dans la psychologie criminelle, l'ouverture d'un procès, et en l'espèce les procès à caractère international, revêt un facteur psychologique déprimant. Il nous semble qu'une fois le procès ouvert, beaucoup de choses peuvent changer et les criminels pourraient être découragés à pérenniser l'entreprise criminelle. Parallèlement aux enquêtes du bureau du procureur, mon pays a placé la lutte contre l'impunité au centre de son système de gouvernance. C'est dans ces conditions que plusieurs décisions judiciaires ont été rendues contre les responsables des crimes les plus graves portant atteinte à la sécurité nationale. À ces crimes, plusieurs dispositions combinées du statut de Rome et du code judiciaire militaire congolais ont été appliquées sans considération de la pertinence des qualités officielles des auteurs, co-auteurs et complices. Par ailleurs, le président de la République, intervenant au 52e sommet du Conseil des droits de l'homme, avait souhaité l'accompagnement des acteurs dans la création d'une cour pénale spéciale pour le Congo. Cette cour, qui avait pour vocation de poursuivre les crimes commis en RDC entre la période de 1996 et 2002, soit avant l'entrée du statut de Rome en vigueur, devrait viser les cas qui restent encore impunis et dont les victimes sont dans la rue. Il va sans dire que cette juridiction a reçu le soutien du bureau du procureur. Et c'est l'occasion de remercier le bureau du procureur qui a offert sa technicité pour la rédaction des statuts qui actuellement sont en discussion devant les parlements de notre pays. Comment clore ces propos sans prendre part aux travaux actuellement en cours sur l'initiative des États de Vanuatu, de Fidji et de Samoa, tendant à reconnaître la barbarie environnementale comme crime international autonome. Mon pays, la RDC, est arrangé pour permettre effectivement au groupe de travail de concevoir une définition de ces crimes qui soit capacitant à pouvoir corriger les velléités et les résistances au respect des normes environnementales. C'est pour cela que la RDC n'arrêtera pas de contribuer aux réflexions qui tendent à pouvoir reconnaître le caractère international autonome des actes liés à l'écocide. De même, la RDC soutient les processus de révision des amendements relatifs aux crimes d'agression afin d'éliminer les limites juridiques et juridictionnelles qui constituent des obstacles à la répression de l'agression. Mesdames et messieurs, la pente du multilatéralisme ne doit pas remorquer la communauté des valeurs que défend la Cour pénale internationale. Il n'y a pas d'alternative aux valeurs de la justice et de lutte contre l'impunité. C'est sûr et vient à dire qu'aux États qui annoncent leur départ, l'alternative présentée et proposée ne nous semble pas convaincante. C'est pour cela que nous les invitons à demeurer parce que la Cour est la seule communauté qui permet de préserver les vies humaines et de prévenir les catastrophes les plus dramatiques dirigées contre l'humanité. Enfin, c'est l'occasion de remercier ici le travail du greffier pour l'organisation de ces travaux, le travail de Madame la Présidente et de tout votre staff en qui nous avons reconnu la qualité effectivement des rapports à l'été desquels ces travaux sont organisés. Mesdames et messieurs, je vous remercie.
Je vous remercie. And I will now give floor to Ms. Nelly Saroyan, Head of Department of Treaties and International Law, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Armenia. You have the floor.
Thank you. Madam President, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to address this assembly on behalf of the Republic of Armenia. First and foremost, I would like to reaffirm Armenia's unwavering commitment to the principles and values outlined in the Rome Statute. We share a common goal of ensuring accountability for the gravest crimes of concern to the international community. genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and the crime of aggression. These principles are deeply rooted in our collective memory and legal conviction. The history of humankind over thousands of years has logically led to the creation of the International Criminal Court. The ICC is not only a court of last resort, it is a reminder that legality, not power, must be the organizing principle of international life. Our membership is in many ways a message both to our own people and to the international community. It signals our conviction that justice, however delayed, must never be denied, and that even small states have agency in shaping the global legal order, and that legal institutions can and must serve as pillars of stability. Madam President, as we come together for the 23rd session of this Assembly, we do so in a landscape that still presents challenges to the rules-based international framework. However, despite these challenges, the Court has continued to carry out its responsibilities with diligence, impartiality, and remarkable resilience. Armenia believes that our joint commitment to the Court is both a legal obligation and a matter of fundamental commitment to the structure of international justice. As such, we remain firmly committed to supporting the Court in carrying out its mandate, with the view for achieving consistent and equitable access to justice for all under the system of the Rome Statute. In implementing this imperative, Armenia completely follows the fundamental principle that the ICC must remain impartial and free from political interference and external pressure. Excellencies, after the ratification of the statute, Armenia as a state party reiterates its firm commitment to strengthening its national implementation framework and to upholding the values of international criminal justice. In this context, Armenia is proceeding with the adoption of comprehensive national legislation regulating all aspects of cooperation with the International Criminal Court in full conformity with the obligations arising under the Rome Statute. In addition, Armenia is actively engaged in negotiations and preparatory work toward the conclusion of voluntary cooperation agreements aimed at further enhancing its capacity to fulfill cooperation obligations and to support the Court's mandate. Ladies and gentlemen, let us therefore use this session not only to reaffirm our support, but also to translate it into concrete actions that protect the Court, strengthen the Rome Statute system, and advance the cause of justice. Armenia remains committed to working with all state parties and with the Court to uphold international law and to defend the rule of law. The pursuit of justice is not merely a responsibility to the past, but an investment in a peaceful future. I would like to conclude this speech with the words of famous American lawyer Benjamin Ferencz. There can be no peace without justice, no justice without law, and no law without a court to decide what is just. I thank you.
Thank you for your statement. And I will now give floor to His Excellency Eros Gasperoni, Ambassador of San Marino to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. San Marino has aligned itself with a statement delivered by the Danish Presidency of the European Union. However, I would like to highlight some issues which are particularly relevant for my country. It is with a deep sense of concern that I address today this Assembly in The Hague. After several years of absence due to our limited administrative capacity, my country could not miss this annual event again in such a particularly delicate, volatile, and dangerous moment in history and global geopolitical context. This is true especially for small-sized states, which, for their defense and survival, cannot resort to the force of weapons and armies, but can only rely on and hope for the maintenance and strengthening of a rule-based international order. Over the past year, threats and attacks against the International Criminal Court have increased exponentially, and almost no one could have imagined that the court would one day be targeted by sanctions usually designed and directed against individuals and entities engaged in illegal, criminal, and terrorist activities. San Marino deplores any form of sanction imposed on the court and its officials. The court is a cornerstone in the construction of a more just, peaceful, and democratic world, an instrument of international justice that finds its legal basis in the Charter of the United Nations and in international human rights conventions, whose establishment represents one of the most extraordinary and revolutionary advances for our legal civilization. International law is either respected or violated. The alternative to the ICC and the multilateral system is the law of the strongest, the rule of lawlessness, arbitrariness, and impunity, and the systematic violation of fundamental human rights, freedoms, and democracy. Those who reject the centrality of law and the authority of the institutions protecting it place themselves outside the international legal order and at the head of a hierarchical international order where the might is right principle prevails. San Marino believed in the merits of the project for the creation of the ICC from the outset, as a result of the mobilization of many citizens and civil society organizations, which in 1995 gave rise to an international coalition in as many as 150 countries. The aim was to establish the first and only permanent, independent, impartial, fair, and effective international jurisdiction with the power to judge individuals responsible for the most serious international crimes. San Marino demonstrated this by ratifying the Rome Statute very quickly back in July 1999. It was the third country overall to do so, and the first European country. The spirit in which we sit here today has not changed, in the awareness that only by observing the rules of international law can peace be maintained everywhere. We therefore warmly welcome Ukraine's accession as the 125th state party to the Rome Statute and are dismayed by the decision of those countries that have expressed their intention to withdraw from the statute, thereby rejecting the authority and jurisdiction of the court. Unlike these countries, we believe that the court's jurisdiction should not only be defended, but also expanded and harmonized to fully encompass the horrific crime of aggression, a goal that unfortunately could not be achieved during the special session of the Assembly last July, where we decided that victims of crimes of aggression can wait until 2029 to hope to see their rights recognized. We even like to dream that the court's jurisdiction may one day include the investigation and cessation of crimes consisting of systemic violations of fundamental rights or assets which are not yet covered by criminal law, such as the production and trade of weapons. Madam President, San Marino strongly believes in the mission of the court and intends to continue to stand on the side of international law and not on the side of those who reject any authority above the state, act unilaterally, and refuse to comply with those international rules that their predecessors, in the aftermath of the Second World War, laid down as the foundation of the international order to save future generations from the scourge of war. Today, ongoing wars worldwide risk obliterating jus in bello and becoming, with the spread of digital technology on the battlefield, bellum internecinum. International law must apply to everyone, and it is the law that must exercise control over political power. If the opposite were true, it would be the end of democracy, rule of law, and multilateralism. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for your statement. And the next speaker is His Excellency Ammar Hiyachi, Permanent Representative of the State of Palestine to international organizations in the Kingdom of the Netherlands. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, Madam President. Allow me at the beginning to extend our appreciation for your leadership and admiration for the way you are steering our work at these turbulent times. Thank you very much. Our appreciation also goes to the personnel of the court for their courageous and dedication to the work of the court, including the leadership of the court. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we meet at a time when prosecutors and judges are sanctioned and war criminals are shielded, at a time when victims of atrocity crimes are denied the justice they owed, while red carpets are rolled out for wanted criminals, and while the atrocities they committed are hailed as victory. Today, civil society organizations are punished for documenting crimes and cooperating with the court. This surreal reality poses an existential threat to the court. More broadly, it confronts humanity with a decisive choice between our aspirations for international justice and utter lawlessness and impunity. How we act today will determine which way the arc of history bends. That is why we cannot afford ambiguity, indecision, or submission to threats. Madam President, protecting the court and its independence, impartiality, and integrity is not optional. As state parties, we are duty-bound to adopt clear and effective measures to protect the court, those who work in it, the judges that presides over the cases, and those who cooperate with them. This is elemental. We must stand united against sanctions and put an end to this travesty. We must also stand up for the rights of victims, all victims, under the jurisdiction of the court, to justice without selectivity or double standards, including Palestinian victims. The State of Palestine is open for constructive dialogue. In this regard, allow me to remind of the obvious. There is difference between dialogue and extortion. If the Rome Statute and the ICC are to survive this unprecedented assault, then we must be unwavering in our defense, not looking for an easy way out that harms the court. The only way for this international mechanism of justice to survive is by ensuring its independence and protecting its ability to seek justice for all under its mandate without fear or favor. Certainly, this cannot be achieved by statements like the ones we heard here that grants immunity under which the Rome Statute does not grant it, or the jurisprudence of the court does not give it. Madam President, the ongoing independent investigations in the situation in the State of Palestine and compliance by state parties of their obligations under the Rome Statute have exposed deficits in integrity and commitment. But let there be no doubt, failing the litmus test that this Palestine case presents will irreversibly compromise, if not completely derail, this mechanism. No state, however powerful it is, has the right to position itself as a stick-wielding enforcer of the world order, arrogating to itself the right to determine how, when, and whom the law should be enforced. And no victims, no matter their skin color or faith, nationality, should be denied justice. Madam President, the arrest warrants issued by the court against Israel's Prime Minister and former ministers of defense are the beginning of a path to end Israel's impunity. The court applied the facts and the law. It did its part to hold perpetrators accountable. It is not their identity that brings them before the court, but their boundless criminality televised for all to witness, criminality announced in their statements, written in their policies, filmed by their soldiers, and committed against entire people. The arrest warrants challenged and entrenched Israeli exceptionalism and a Palestinian exception, where impunity was entrenched and accountability was forever denied. Madam President, I want to conclude my remarks from this podium by saluting Palestinian civil society. Despite crippling sanctions, attacks, assassinations, they continue to cooperate with the court, the victims, and witnesses. They do so with inspiring bravery, nobility, and commitment to the rights and dignity of the victims, as well as the rule of law. Sanctioning Palestinian civil society is an act of political cruelty that endangers the lives of human rights defenders and denies victims access to the court. We call on the court and all states parties to support and protect Palestinian civil society and ensure access of victims to justice. This is the heart of our mandate, and we must not shy away from our responsibility. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for your statement, and I will now give forward to Mr. Diego Sadovski, Chargé d'Affaires of Argentina to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Muchas gracias, señora Presidente. Es un honor representar a la República Argentina en esta asamblea en un contexto internacional que demanda respuestas congruentes y ejemplificadoras frente a los desafíos más urgentes en materia de justicia penal. Reitero el compromiso de mi país contra la impunidad de los crímenes más graves, guiados por los principios de justicia, independencia e imparcialidad. Notamos que desde que la oficina del fiscal anunciara en noviembre de 2021 la conclusión del examen preliminar sobre la situación en Venezuela, como hemos dicho, ha habido pocos avances. Las detenciones arbitrarias, los tratos inhumanos y otros crímenes contra la humanidad que perpetra el régimen venezolano requieren investigaciones rigurosas pero expeditivas, incluyendo el dictado de órdenes de arresto contra sus principales responsables. Esta situación contrasta con la situación en Palestina, abierta el mismo año, que ha avanzado aceleradamente con órdenes de arresto dictadas en 2024 contra altas autoridades israelíes. Argentina, respetando la independencia de la Corte, considera que debió evaluarse más acabadamente el contexto en el que Israel ejerce su derecho legítimo a la defensa frente a ataques de organizaciones terroristas. Asimismo, debería ponderarse el artículo 98 del Estatuto, que establece que la Corte no dará curso a solicitudes de entrega incompatibles con obligaciones que imponga el derecho internacional. Esperamos que la presentación de Israel del 17 de noviembre reciba el análisis que amerita. La legalidad de la labor de la Corte Penal Internacional y su legitimidad dependen del estricto apego al Estatuto de Roma. A los Estados partes corresponde su interpretación teniendo en cuenta el texto, los trabajos preparatorios y las intenciones de las partes. Eso incluye disposiciones como el artículo 98 y el artículo 7, inciso 3, sobre las definiciones de género. Urgimos a esta Asamblea a abocarse a estos asuntos para asegurar una interpretación común del Estatuto y avanzar hacia su universalidad. Argentina pide que se registre formalmente su posición sobre estas cuestiones al momento de la adopción de las distintas resoluciones. Los problemas que la Corte atraviesa tienen origen en que los Estados parte no hemos entendido que un tribunal requiere ser verdaderamente independiente. No debemos interferir en sus decisiones mediante condicionamientos presupuestarios o de otra forma. Es ilustrativo recordar cómo esta Asamblea se apartó del procedimiento establecido para elegir fiscal cuando el resultado no fue el esperado. Lo mismo cabe decir de la reacción de varios Estados parte frente a órdenes de arresto dictadas por la CPI, dependiendo de la situación de que se tratara. Si existen reglas, debemos respetarlas rigurosa e integralmente, evitando el doble rasero y la politización de cuestiones judiciales. Argentina ratifica su compromiso con el Estatuto de Roma y apoyará los esfuerzos de la Corte Penal Internacional para investigar y sancionar crímenes con rigor. Simultáneamente, defendemos el derecho de las naciones democráticas a protegerse frente a amenazas existenciales y garantizar la seguridad ciudadana. Ambos objetivos no son incompatibles. Solo con resultados justos que consideren todas las complejidades de cada caso, podremos fortalecer la confianza en esta institución y consolidar los principios que le son inherentes. Muchas gracias.
Thank you for your statement. Et maintenant, je donne la parole à Madame Annette André Onanga, représentant permanent adjoint aux Nations Unies du Gabon. Vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Madame la Présidente. Je voudrais tout d'abord vous réitérer au nom de mon pays toutes nos félicitations pour l'excellente manière avec laquelle vous conduisez votre mandat à la présidence de cette Assemblée depuis déjà 1 an, ce dans un contexte marqué par de nombreux défis. Nous vous encourageons à poursuivre vos efforts en vue du rayonnement de la justice pénale sous toutes ses formes et du renforcement de l'efficacité de la Cour. Il m'importe de souligner que la lutte contre l'impunité doit demeurer un impératif pour la communauté internationale, comme le stipule explicitement le préambule du statut de la Cour pénale internationale. C'est pourquoi le droit international pénal et son objectif universel, qu'est la lutte contre l'impunité, doivent toujours constituer le fondement de la légitimité de notre Cour. Le Gabon tient d'emblée à souligner que malgré les nombreux écueils qui émaillent sa courte existence, qu'il s'agisse du champ limité de ses activités ou de questions liées à ses stratégies de poursuite, la CPI demeure une institution indispensable de promotion de la justice pénale internationale et de la justice tout court. Sans une institution permanente telle que la Cour pénale internationale, les engagements pris pour renforcer la justice pénale ne seraient que de vains mots. Mon pays voudrait réaffirmer ici son attachement sans faille à l'intégrité du statut de Rome et à la promotion de l'état de droit, mais aussi sa ferme détermination à lutter contre l'impunité. C'est une position de principe à laquelle nous ne saurons transiger. Madame la Présidente, le principe de la complémentarité de la Cour aux juridictions nationales affirmé dès les premières lignes du statut est une innovation essentielle dans le domaine de la justice pénale, car il permet de renforcer la souveraineté des États en consolidant leur rôle de premier gardien des règles nationales et internationales. Une telle approche tient pleinement compte des préoccupations de certains États face à la concentration géographique disproportionnée des activités de la Cour, tout en renforçant le caractère de tribunal de dernière instance de la CPI. Nous notons à cet effet et avec satisfaction que les nombreux cas soumis à la CPI depuis ces dernières années reflètent l'intérêt croissant des États parties au statut de Rome de porter à l'attention de la communauté internationale les questions relatives aux crimes graves pour lesquels les juridictions nationales restent, d'une manière générale, impuissantes ou inadéquatement préparés. Madame la Présidente, les efforts visant à mettre fin à l'impunité exigent par ailleurs que les juges siègent à la Cour, les juges qui siègent à la Cour effectuent leur activité judiciaire dans de bonnes conditions, sans intimidation ni menace, en disposant de tous les éléments nécessaires à la conduite d'enquêtes impartiales. La CPI est à l'image de notre monde et demeure sans aucun doute un immense chantier. Ses avancées, ses hésitations et ses manquements reflètent les dynamiques parfois contradictoires qu'entretient la justice pénale internationale avec les réalités politiques internationales. Il nous revient donc de tout faire pour ne point perdre de vue la raison d'être de notre entreprise, qui est de préserver la dignité de la vie en faisant reculer toujours plus loin les frontières de l'impunité pour les crimes graves. Pour conclure, le Gabon tient à réaffirmer son soutien à la Cour pénale internationale et exhorte celle-ci à mener son action en toute impartialité. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Je vous remercie. And the next speaker will be His Excellency Oro Tevi, Ambassador, Permanent Representative to the United Nations of Vanuatu. You have the floor.
Madam President, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the Republic of Vanuatu is proud to be here to address this esteemed assembly. Vanuatu reiterates our unwavering commitment to the International Criminal Court and the values it seeks to enforce. We are proud to have engaged in various recent efforts to promote the strength and implementation of the Rome Statute. Notably, in April this year, we were one of the 5 countries that submitted an amendment to the UN Secretary-General to harmonize the ICC's jurisdiction over the crime of aggression in line with existing core crimes. We reiterate our gratitude to all state parties for their collaboration to reach consensus at the special session this July, and note our ongoing support for this critical conversation in the run-up to 2029. We are also grateful to continue our mandate as the Asia-Pacific's regional focal point on matters of non-cooperation with the Rome Statute, reflecting our commitment to promoting the perspective of small islands within the international criminal law. As a highly climate-vulnerable nation, Vanuatu also observes with gratitude the Court's ongoing attention to the centrality of environmental crimes and harms to the commission of existing crimes under the Rome Statute, particularly in the light of the ICJ advisory opinion on climate change. We note that the links between environmental damage and grave violations of human rights have never been more apparent. We therefore take this moment to underscore our commitment to promoting ecocide as the 5th independent crime under the Rome Statute, both in times of conflict and times of peace. We thank the nations of Fiji, Samoa, and the Democratic Republic of Congo for their public support of our amendment proposal to the Rome Statute, and invite all interested delegations to explore this matter further with us. Madam President, in closing, let me highlight that Vanuatu continues to observe threats and sanctions against the court and its officials with great concern. Particularly for small states, the ICC, our court, must be able to fulfill its role in maintaining international peace and security. We urge all states parties to recognize the importance and the potential of the Rome Statute both as it stands as it may evolve. I thank you.
Thank you for your statement. We have now concluded the statements by states parties representatives. I thank all those speakers for their statements and support pledged for the court. I do recognize that Venezuela has requested the floor, so I will now give the floor to the representative of Venezuela.
Gracias, señora presidenta. Venezuela entiende que este es el momento para tomar la palabra y rechazar de forma categórica los señalamientos contra mi país proferidos por el delegado del gobierno de Javier Milei. Seguimos tomando nota de la afición del gobierno de Javier Milei por cosechar en la Corte Penal titulares de prensa en medios amarillistas. Pero ese es el estilo de su política exterior, no lo compartimos, que pretende erigirse en falso defensor de derechos humanos en esta sala cuando en la intervención defienden al mayor genocida actual del planeta y no dicen ni una palabra para condenar las sanciones. En cualquier caso, Venezuela, por supuesto, como ha señalado en su intervención, reitera la cooperación con la Corte, confía en la imparcialidad de sus mandatos e invita a cualquier delegación, pero particularmente a Argentina, a tomar nota de lo que dice la Comisión contra la Tortura de Naciones Unidas con relación al desmantelamiento de los equipos de investigación que investigan justamente la dictadura argentina que ese gobierno se niega a reconocer. Los invitamos, pues, a recordar a las 30.000 víctimas de la dictadura argentina para poder hacer memoria y para que nosotros, con un proceso de reparación, comprendamos que es a partir de allí donde la Corte garantiza sus bases morales y busca fortalecer la justicia internacional sin impunidad. Venezuela, pues, con el respeto debido a la sala, exige también el respeto para sus autoridades y para los procesos que la sala justamente contempla. Gracias, señora presidenta.
Thank you, and I give floor to Argentina.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta. Simplemente esta delegación desea desconocer y repudiar las expresiones recientemente recibidas de parte de la delegación de Venezuela y ratifica en todo el contenido de nuestra declaración. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, and the State of Palestine has requested for the floor. You have the...
Thank you, Madam President. I'm taking the floor to exercise our right of reply in response to the statement made by the Argentinian representative in their national statement. We find that incredibly incredulous and frankly risible that the Argentinian delegate started their statement with, and I quote, "My country stands firmly against those who commit crimes," while in the same breath reject the court's independent investigation and decisions in the situation in the state of Palestine, risking compromising the impartiality and integrity of the judicial process for their own political calculations, and essentially denying justice to millions of Palestinian victims. Are we to understand that the Argentinian delegate, as they claimed, or Argentina, stands firmly against those who commit crimes, except those that are committed by their allies? There is no way to describe what Israel is doing in the Gaza Strip other than crimes, war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. And the Argentinian representative requested that the court takes into consideration the context, between quotes, in which Israel is committing its crimes. But we can share the context. The context is colonial erasure, illegal occupation, 77 years of ethnic cleansing, genocide, apartheid, all crimes that one can imagine, torture and rape. Argentina also speaks of the so-called right of self-defense by Israel. If the Argentinian delegate can point us towards the provisions in the Rome Statute that they say that states have rights to commit genocides, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, under which law, in which circumstance Israel has the right to kill over 20,000 children, at a rate of 1 child an hour, an average of 30 children a day, for over 740 days? Why is Argentina justifying the mass slaughter of a people? To justify the worst crimes in modern times under the pretext of self-defense is an insult not just to the millions of Palestinian victims, but to the Rome Statute and its promise of never again. We recall that as a state party, Argentina has accepted the jurisdiction of the court and thus has an obligation to execute the arrest warrants in the situation in the state of Palestine. And no amount of politicized statements will absolve Argentina of its obligations. Thank you.
Thank you, and I have one more request of reply. I give the floor to Argentina.
Muchas gracias, señora presidenta, y hacemos uso de la palabra una vez más, y le agradezco por dármela, como un miembro fundador de esta Corte, un participante activo y un miembro colaborador, hacer desconocer las expresiones vertidas por la delegación palestina recientemente. Ratificamos en todo, en su totalidad, el contenido de la declaración que acabamos de pronunciar. Muchas gracias.
I thank you. I give the last time floor to State of Palestine. Please be brief, as we would need to continue our list of speakers then.
Thank you, Madam President. Argentina said that they are a founding member of the court, but somehow they needed to be reminded of their obligations under the Rome Statute. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I would refer that on the basis of previous Assembly decisions, the Bureau recommended that the Assembly allocate 45 minutes for the participation in the general debate of observers pursuant to Rule 92 of the Rules of Procedure of the Assembly. And we will start with the statement by Mr. He Liang, legal advisor of the Embassy to the Kingdom of the Netherlands of the People's Republic of China. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, Excellencies and distinguished delegates, I have the privilege to address this Assembly on behalf of the Chinese observer delegation. At present, the international landscape is marked by transformation and turbulence, with regional conflicts and turmoil protracting and spilling over. Against this backdrop, the International Criminal Court is facing a growing number of situations and cases, many of which are intricate and sensitive in nature. The international community watches closely what steps the ICC would take to address the challenges, to perform its duties impartially and objectively, and to handle the situations and cases appropriately. China, being a country suffered from atrocities during the Second World War, consistently supports the global efforts in preventing and punishing the most serious crimes in accordance with law. Such support dates back to almost 80 years ago, when China actively participated in and contributed to the work of the International Military Tribunal for the Far East, also known as the Tokyo Trial. China took part in negotiating the Rome Statute and has been paying close attention to the work of the ICC since its establishment. It is China's persistent proposition that the ICC strictly abides by the mandate conferred by the Rome Statute. To be more specific, we expect the court to interpret and apply the Rome Statute and the general international law in a coherent manner and in good faith, and to fully comply with the principles of complementarity and international cooperation. Jurisdiction over nationals of non-state parties must not be arbitrarily established or exercised. Furthermore, there can be no place for politicization, selectivity, or double standards in the ICC's work. Independence and impartiality are, as the president of the court put it, the polar stars of the court, and should be upheld throughout the investigation, prosecution, and adjudication. By doing so, the ICC would be better poised to play a constructive role in upholding justice and maintaining peace and stability. Madam President, the ICC's approach to immunities of state officials has long been a source of controversy, legally and politically. Although ending impunity is a legitimate goal of the court, it is established principle under customary international law that sitting heads of states and governments, foreign ministers, and other high-ranking officials enjoy absolute immunities from criminal jurisdiction as well as inviolability. Article 27 of the Rome Statute, although interpreted as excluding the application of such immunities, is binding only on states parties. And it is noteworthy that provided by the Vienna Convention on the law of treaties, treaties do not create obligations or rights for third parties. Neither Article 27 nor any other articles of the Rome Statute alters the states parties' obligation to respect immunity under general international law. In July of this year, a special session of the Assembly of States Parties was held to review the amendments on the crime of aggression. China notes the differing views expressed regarding the expansion of the court's jurisdiction over the crime of aggression. China wishes to reiterate that the issue of the crime of aggression is intrinsically linked to international peace and security. The Charter of the UN has tasked the Security Council with the primary responsibility of maintaining international peace and security, including the responsibility and authority in determining the existence of acts of aggression. Therefore, utmost caution should be taken in amending the Rome Statute and exercising the court's jurisdiction, so that the mandate of the Security Council remains intact and the sovereignty and jurisdiction of non-state parties be fully respected. Madam President, China has listened to the previous interventions carefully and notes the concern expressed on repeated imposition of unilateral sanctions by one state against the judges and prosecutors of the ICC. China persistently opposes and condemns unilateral sanctions that violate international law. Imposing such sanctions are essentially placing individual states' own will and domestic laws above international law and are detrimental to the international legal order. In conclusion, trust and support can only be earned through concrete actions. China hopes the International Criminal Court will maintain an objective and just position, actively respond to the concerns of states, and play a positive role in safeguarding fairness and justice and promoting peace and security. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank you, and I will give floor to His Excellency Abbas Pakpour Ardegani, Director General for International Legal Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iran. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Let me begin by extending my delegation's sincere appreciation to you, Madam President, to preside over this session of the Assembly in an efficient manner. Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the Islamic Republic of Iran attaches great importance to fighting impunity and effective prosecution of perpetrators of the most serious crimes of concern to the international community as a whole. The ICC functions consistent with the principle of complementarity so as to avoid overextension into matters that can be adequately addressed by national jurisdictions. During the past year, the draft legislation on international crimes was finalized and submitted by the Iranian government to the parliament for its consideration and adoption. Although crimes under the court's jurisdiction have already been prosecutable under existing Iranian laws and regulations, the new draft law is aimed at setting up a specialized framework for prosecution of genocide, crime against humanity, war crimes, and the crime of aggression. Madam President, the current global landscape presents intensifying challenges that demand the court's vigilant and punctual response. As an alarming sui generis situation, the atrocities committed against the Palestinian people continue to outrage the conscience of humanity. Today, there has not remained doubt regarding the commission of genocide. The actus reus and mens rea of this crime are evident, and the special intent is manifest given the official policies and statements of the Israeli criminals, in particular during the past 2 years in Gaza. It is, however, disappointing that so far the genocidal acts committed against the Palestinian people have not been the subject of a thorough investigation by the court. Amidst this, it is ironic that certain state parties to the Rome Statute refrain from cooperating with the court and have declared that they would not comply with the court's arrest warrant. Such illegal approach contributes to normalization of impunity for crimes under the court's jurisdiction and further breed the banality of evil. Madam President, emboldened by impunity, the Israeli regime and the United States launched a war of aggression against Iran in June 2025 and deliberately targeted civilians and civilian objects in commission of war crimes. These assaults resulted in the martyrdom of more than 1,000 individuals, including 200 women and children, and injured thousands more. The individual criminal responsibility of all those engaged for directing deliberate attacks against civilians, including women and children, scientists, university professors, journalists, and prisoners, among others, launching willful attacks against civilian objects, in particular hospitals and ambulances, and energy infrastructure, including peaceful nuclear facilities, has therefore been established. Likewise, all those involved in commanding, ordering, committing, or aiding, abetting, and otherwise assisting in the commission of the aforementioned war crimes bear the same individual criminal responsibility. Against this backdrop, as a victim of the crime of aggression, the Islamic Republic of Iran closely follows up the efforts aimed at amending the conditions regarding the application of the court's jurisdiction with regard to the crime of aggression. Madam President, the independence and impartiality of the court, its judges and staff, and the exercise of their functions free from undue influence or external threats are essential for the administration of justice. We fully understand the pressure placed on the court by way of unilateral coercive measures against fundamental principles of international law. In my country, countless civilians, including patients, have been deprived of medicine and other essential items and services due to pervasive unilateral coercive measures. Since such measures are imposed on a large scale, directed against a civilian population, and are carried out with a clear state policy, they are tantamount to the crime against humanity. To conclude, Madam President, we stand at a critical juncture. Unilateralism and normalization of international crimes sadly prevail over efforts geared toward bringing criminals to justice. Let us allow no room for impunity and ensure that genociders and aggressors fail in their agenda. To that end, we must work together and spare no effort to build an environment conducive to the realization of peace and tranquility for our children and our next generation. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for your remarks, and next speaker is Her Excellency Eva Jelena Silva Walker, Ambassador of Cuba to the Kingdom of the Netherlands.
Señora Presidenta, mi delegación agradece la posibilidad de intervenir en esta 24 sesión de la Asamblea de Estados Partes de la Corte Penal Internacional y desea ratificar el estricto compromiso de Cuba con la lucha contra la impunidad de los crímenes que afectan a la comunidad internacional. Todas las naciones hacemos frente a crecientes desafíos y a conflictos multidimensionales que arriesgan la paz y la seguridad internacionales. La flagrante violación del derecho internacional humanitario y el genocidio que se comete contra la población palestina en Gaza es la muestra evidente de que se requiere con urgencia de una institución jurisdiccional internacional verdaderamente independiente que contribuya a garantizar que no haya impunidad contra los crímenes más graves. Cuba mantiene serias reservas sobre las excesivas e injustificadas facultades otorgadas al Consejo de Seguridad de las Naciones Unidas en virtud del artículo 16 del Estatuto de Roma en relación con el trabajo de la Corte Penal Internacional. Estas facultades impiden que esta Corte sea la institución independiente que debe ser. Como consecuencia, además de desvirtuarse la esencia de la jurisdicción de este órgano, se viola el principio capital de la independencia de los órganos jurisdiccionales y la transparencia e imparcialidad en la administración de justicia. Señora Presidenta, es imperativo el respeto en todo momento del principio de derecho relativo al consentimiento del Estado para obligarse por un tratado, refrendado en el artículo 11 de la Convención de Viena sobre el Derecho de los Tratados del 23 de mayo de 1969, que goza de amplio reconocimiento por parte de los Estados. Recordamos que la jurisdicción de la Corte Penal Internacional debe mantenerse independiente de los órganos políticos de las Naciones Unidas y funcionar de manera complementaria a las jurisdicciones penales nacionales. El Estatuto de Roma no fue creado para reemplazar a los tribunales nacionales, pues ello atentaría contra la soberanía de los Estados. Sobre la definición del crimen de agresión adoptada en la Conferencia de Kampala, Cuba considera que la misma es incompleta y carece de varios elementos de importancia que requieren ser incorporados. Dicha definición debe ser genérica y abarcar todas las formas de agresión que se manifiestan en las relaciones internacionales entre los Estados y que no se circunscriben solamente al uso de la fuerza armada y que también afectan la soberanía, la integridad territorial y la independencia política de los Estados. Señora Presidenta, Cuba reitera su disposición a continuar participando en procesos de negociación relacionados con la Corte Penal Internacional, incluyendo la resolución titulada Informe de la Corte Penal Internacional, que cada año es discutida y adoptada por la Asamblea General, así como a dar seguimiento a los procesos en curso. Para concluir, reafirmo la posición de mi país a favor del establecimiento de una jurisdicción penal internacional, imparcial, no selectiva, eficaz, justa y complementaria de los sistemas nacionales de justicia, verdaderamente independiente y, por tanto, exenta de subordinaciones a intereses políticos que puedan desvirtuar su esencia. No dejaremos nunca de actuar con apego y coherencia a los principios de transparencia, independencia e imparcialidad y seremos consecuentes con la aplicación irrestricta y el derecho internacional. Muchas gracias.
I thank you for your statement, and we will now proceed with statements by international organizations and other entities. And our first speaker is Ms. Paola Forgione, Legal Advisor of the International Committee of the Red Cross. You have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in the 19th century, the International Committee of the Red Cross started advocating for the creation of an international court to prosecute individuals for war crimes. Already at that time, it was clear that ensuring respect for the newly adopted 1864 Geneva Convention was a responsibility which could not be borne exclusively by domestic legislators and courts. In a publication of 1872, we first tried to conceptualize the principle of complementarity. Because of our long-standing belief in the importance of an international mechanism to ensure accountability for war crimes, in 1998 we warmly welcomed the signature of the Rome Statute. Over the past 27 years, we have stood alongside states in their efforts to ratify and to give effect to the Rome Statute within their domestic legal systems. Our support has taken many forms. For example, we have provided legal advice to lawmakers and we have contributed to the development of a model law for the national implementation of the Rome Statute. This work continues today as we remain committed to assisting states in strengthening their legal frameworks in line with the Rome Statute. Today, the delegates of the International Committee of the Red Cross witness horrifying violations of international humanitarian law while working in the more than 130 conflicts that are currently occurring around the world. But we also witness a new and concerning phenomenon. Certain states have withdrawn or are signaling the intention to withdraw from some of the treaties which strengthen the protection of both civilians and combatants in armed conflicts, in particular disarmament treaties and the Rome Statute. These treaties were specifically designed to prevent and punish violations of international humanitarian law. Withdrawing from such treaties means undermining decades of global efforts, of negotiations, of a shared vision towards a more humane world. Withdrawals undermine the fight against impunity and risk normalizing serious violations of international humanitarian law. At this time of acute international tensions and during this very trying moment for international justice, states must uphold and not weaken their obligations to prevent and punish serious violations of international humanitarian law. In the same spirit, we must all seize the momentum of the 24th Assembly of State Parties to redouble our efforts to promote the universal adherence to the Rome Statute. The International Committee of the Red Cross calls on all states to recommit strongly and visibly to the Rome Statute and to make it clear that their commitment is unwavering. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your remarks. And the next speaker is Mr. Vaios Koutroulis, representing International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Let me express my gratitude to the Assembly of the States Parties for inviting the International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission to attend the travaux of the Assembly and for giving me the opportunity to say a few words. Establishing individual criminal responsibility for grave breaches and other serious violations of international humanitarian law is among the key methods of ensuring accountability for violations of this law. But it is not the only one. Among the means of ensuring compliance with humanitarian law are also inquiries, fact-finding, and good offices. In the age of disinformation, misinformation, and fake news, a proper establishment of facts is more necessary than ever. And this is precisely what our Commission does. The Commission is established under Article 90 of the first protocol additional to the Geneva Conventions. We are neither an organ of the United Nations nor of any other international or regional organizations. We are created by states, states parties to the first additional protocol, and our competence is based on states' consent. This consent so far has been expressed by 78 states, the majority of which are states parties to the ICC statute. We are an impartial, independent, non-political organization composed of 15 experts with different backgrounds, medical doctors, diplomats, lawyers, military officers, acting in their personal capacities, who are able to undertake inquiries regarding IHL violations. We are a permanent organ, predictable, and ready to undertake a mission at a short notice, contrary to other ad hoc bodies. And last but not least, our confidential, flexible procedures can be shaped depending on circumstances and have the advantage of a low-key, non-confrontational approach. The Commission has proven its worth. First, in 2017, at the request of the OSCE, it undertook a mission in eastern Ukraine to conduct an independent forensic investigation on an incident involving the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission there. Second, in 2024, at the request of Poland, the Commission fulfilled the Good Office's mandate with respect to an incident in the Gaza Strip of which the NGO World Central Kitchen was a victim. Madam President, implementation of international humanitarian law depends on political will. Adhering to the Rome Statute and accepting the jurisdiction of the court for the most serious international crimes, among which war crimes, is of course proof of such will. The will, in the words of the preamble, to put an end to impunity and thus contribute to the prevention of core international crimes. The International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission gives you an additional complementary avenue towards what is in essence the same goal, contributing to the prevention of violations of humanitarian law. And these violations lie, of course, at the heart of war crimes. 55 states parties to the Rome Statute are also parties to the first additional protocol, but have not yet recognized the competence of the Commission. We would like to encourage them to consider such recognition. And we would also like to remind to all states, even those that are not parties to the first additional protocol, that they can use the Commission's good offices and fact-finding services on an ad hoc basis, with the advantages described above. In times of recurring humanitarian law violations, it is time to prove your commitment to ensuring respect for IHL and your support to the mechanisms which do ensure its respect and implementation. And one strong way of doing so is by recognizing the competence of the International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission and using its many capabilities. Thank you for your attention.
I thank you for your statement. And as per the decision by the Bureau dated 5th of November, we will now hear from the President of the ICC Staff Union Council, Mr. Uktamion Shomurodov. I would like to note that the Staff Union Council was granted the opportunity to participate on an exceptional basis and on the understanding that such participation does not set a precedent for future sessions of the Assembly. Mr. Shomurodov, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, Excellencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the Bureau and the Presidency of the ASP for giving us, the Staff Union Council, the voice and the opportunity to present our views today. We think that our views of the Council, as a body that represents more than 1,000 staff members here at the headquarters and the country offices, are pertinent to the discussion today. Already at the last ASP, speaking in the context of the review mechanism session, we urged the state parties to protect the staff of the court, many of whom are your nationals, from the external threat of sanctions so that they can focus and deliver on the mandate of the court. We acknowledge that throughout the year, the state parties have made significant diplomatic and other efforts to counter the US sanctions, and we fully appreciate it. We also thank you for the statements of support during the last UN General Assembly and during this ASP for the last 2 days. As you know, this past year has been extremely challenging in terms of external threat of sanctions. Today, with 9 elected officials sanctioned and with the risk of the further escalation by the US administration, staff members are bearing significant consequences and are anxious more than ever. If institutional sanctions are imposed on the court, it will have severe impact on all staff. For the US nationals, this would mean facing a huge risk of being criminally prosecuted and fined up to hundreds of thousands of US dollars. The non-US nationals can themselves be personally sanctioned if they continue supporting the court, and consequently be blacklisted by the US administration by freezing of their assets with an access to the US dollar or travel ban to the US for themselves and their families. As we have seen from the experiences of our elected officials, this can impact everything, from the ability to use a bank card, using digital services from Airbnb, PayPal, and other US companies. And this risk extends beyond the staff to our families, especially for family members with the US nationals or with family members living in the US. Overcompliance with US sanctions by non-US companies and banks can also add extra challenges for staff members. We acknowledge that the court, in particular the registrar, doing whatever feasible to have alternative arrangements in place in terms of IT systems, banking, and health insurance. The court is also implementing mitigating measures to minimize the impact of sanctions to staff and the court. But the court alone cannot achieve full protection, and we turn to you, the states parties, and the governing body of the court to shield us from that threat of sanctions and to let us continue working to deliver the mandate. We call on you, the state parties, to urgently implement the following recommendations. Number one, blocking statutes. Activate EU and national blocking statutes to shield the court and its personnel from the coercive measures and its impact. In addition, we think that the state parties should engage with and provide guarantees to the commercial companies in their territories, encouraging them to continue interacting with the court in case of institutional sanctions. Number two, litigation strategies. We ask the state parties to devise litigation strategies before the US, EU, and national courts and or any other entity to judicially challenge the sanctions on behalf of the court. And number three, alternative arrangements. The court should be provided with sufficient support so that transitional arrangements are continued to be put in place for the court and its staff to continue the daily functioning, including banking, IT systems, and any other transactions with commercial entities. We, as Staff Union Council, understand that the fact that we are facing these sanctions shows the importance of our work. We consider it an honor and privilege to continue to the mandate of the court, and we stand resolved in our commitment despite these pressures. I thank you for your attention.
I thank you for your statement, and I now invite the President of the International Criminal Court Bar Association, Mr. Philippe La Rochelle, to deliver his statement. You have the floor.
Madame la Présidente, distingués délégués, Excellences, collègues, chers amis, je suis porteur de salutations chaleureuses de l'Association du barreau de la Cour pénale internationale et de salutations un peu plus froides de ses membres qui attendent depuis un certain temps que le chauffage dans les salles de consultation soit réparé. De toute façon, l'inconfort existentiel semble être le thème préféré de la Cour ces jours-ci, alors peut-être que le symbole est bien choisi. Nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui à un moment où la Cour pénale internationale fait face à ce que je ne peux décrire que comme une surabondance de défis. Certaines institutions ont des douleurs de croissance. La CPI, elle, semble avoir des migraines chroniques. Par contre, nous commençons à soupçonner que l'aspirine, le paracétamol ou l'Advil, suivant d'où vous venez, à eux seuls ne sauveront pas la justice internationale. Let me begin with the obvious. Cooperation with the court. Cooperation should be a non-negotiable concept. The court, and by extension our clients, depend on it. There is no room for compromise. Your states have to comply with the commitments they made when they signed the Rome Statute. Then there is the issue of resources. The ICC's budget is once again described as lean. Lean! We've passed that point. We're getting too skeletal. Defense teams cannot operate effectively without timely access to evidence, experts, and field support. Victims teams cannot meaningfully participate without adequate staffing, translation, and safe access to affected communities. These are not luxuries. They are the minimum conditions required for fair, credible, and efficient proceedings. Let me not forget the current political pressure. The court is criticized by states for acting, criticized by other states for not acting, and criticized by everyone else for acting in the wrong direction at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. The ICCBA, nevertheless, has consistently stood by the court. As stated in our recent press releases, we strongly condemn any sanctions, intimidation, or reprisals that target judges, prosecutors, counsel, or NGOs solely for contributing to our judicial process. Despite these obstacles, the ICC community continues to show extraordinary commitment. Councils continue to file submissions from airport lounges, remote villages, and moving vehicles. Why is that? Because we all dedicate our profession to what we think is well worth it beyond borders. Differently, given our roles, but similarly to the judges of this court who continue to navigate legal and political minefields with elegance and strategic patience. Our Bar Association hopes to be able to remain dedicated to ensure that counsel have the independence, support, and respect required to fulfill their mandates. I say hope because without meaningful support from your states, this might very well be the last time you have the chance to hear from the ICCBA, an organization that you states have decided to recognize and that deserves and requires its space to represent those who form a vital part of this ecosystem. Without competent counsel and support staff, no trial. Without trial, no accountability for international crimes. Defense and victims' counsel and their teams are not optional accessories to international justice. They are the oxygen that keeps the system alive. Despite limited progress on our requests, the Step 5, the tax issue, the inflation, the legal uncertainty for the support staff, still we persevere. If resilience was remunerated, we would all have earned fortunes. However, I don't want to miss to express my gratitude to all states that have continuously supported us in numerous meetings and communications regarding the question of taxation of our remuneration, which stays an ongoing concern for all our members who are active before this court. I would like to extend a special thanks to Ambassador Adsett of Canada for his leadership of the legal aid facilitation. Despite ongoing challenges, the ICCBA has expanded its engagement with the global legal community, signing cooperation agreements with several regional and national bar associations, building bridges of mutual support and shared professional standards. We warmly invite all delegations to join us at the ICCBA and Friends Conference Nationale des Barreaux side event taking place today at 6:15 in the Mississippi Room. Alors oui, la situation est sombre, mais si la justice pénale nous enseigne quelque chose, c'est que persévérer face à des obstacles impossibles, ce n'est pas de la naïveté, c'est une nécessité. Excellence, la CPI ne peut survivre grâce au symbolisme. Elle ne peut prospérer grâce au discours. Elle ne peut fonctionner grâce à la seule bonne volonté. Elle a besoin de votre soutien concret, de votre coopération constante et, oserais-je le dire, de votre courage. Je vous remercie.
Je vous remercie. And lastly, the Bureau also recommended that 45 minutes be allocated to non-governmental organizations for the delivery of statements at the end of the general debate. We will now invite the representatives of non-governmental organizations to present their statements. And the first speaker is Mr. Nicolo Figa Talamanca of the Coalition for the ICC. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the Assembly, colleagues. I'm addressing you today on behalf of the Coalition for the ICC. We are represented at this session of the Assembly by more than 200 human rights defenders from around the world. 30 years ago, we came together as an NGO coalition with one goal: to support the establishment and operation of an independent, effective, and impartial permanent international criminal court. Our mission remains the same today. This year, an escalation of the biggest challenges we have ever faced, threatening the foundations of international justice and the existence of the institutions that we have helped create. It creates unprecedented obstacles to civil society doing its job. ICC judges and prosecutors being subjected to sham criminal prosecutions in the Russian Federation, the United States sanctions against the ICC officials, staff, and particularly civil society organizations cooperating with the court create new threats to the Rome Statute system. We welcome the strong and principled responses of the state parties that have come together to firmly and without reservations condemn those sanctions and uphold the promise states made in 1998, which is not simply a promise now, but indeed a legal obligation. The world is watching, victims are watching, and the dynamics of impunity are inescapable. When violence and atrocities are rewarded with power and legitimacy, atrocities become the legitimate way to power. This is why we ask the states parties to hold fast to their commitments. Giving way to illegitimate interference in the judicial process just this once will not save the court. It will condemn it forever to being at the mercy of whoever is able and willing to exercise the hardest of pressures. I should add, though, this is not just about criminal prosecutions in Russia and not just about US sanctions. Just as dangerous to the Rome Statute justice system architecture are the repeated and blatant failures to cooperate with the court, even by state parties, in open defiance of their legal obligations to execute arrest warrants and other judicial orders by the ICC. Those threats are not going away soon. We cannot wish them away. In the face of those attacks, we must ensure the court has the political support it needs to withstand this difficult season. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the court requires your concrete support to fulfill the very mandate you bestowed upon it. This means ensures the court has a budget which matches its workload, in full respect of its judicial and prosecutorial independence, so that it may continue to do its work across situations, undeterred by threats and wavering political whims. States must fulfill their end of the bargain by ensuring effective cooperation with the court. We welcome the surrender just yesterday of a suspect of the Libyan situation. It is not the case that the court does not have an enforcement mechanism. State parties are the enforcement mechanism of the court. Cooperation, effective cooperation, is crucial to the court's success. This is why we welcome the plenary dedicated to cooperation in this session. This is also why non-cooperation must carry consequences. Excellencies, earlier this year, we gathered in New York for the special session of the ASP on the Kampala amendments. Our members are unequivocal in their view that harmonization of the court's jurisdiction over all 4 crimes would bridge the current accountability gap. We ask that you, the court, state parties, show support so that when the current situation is over, the international justice system will remain standing and can continue its work with the support of civil society that has been and will continue to be so crucial in the court discharging its mandate to provide justice and redress for victims. We've heard the reports from the court. The daily work continues, and we as civil society will continue working with everyday issues to contribute to the court's success and the ability to discharge its mandate. However, this year, given the current critical circumstance, I will end where I began. The current threats against the ICC and those who support and cooperate with it, namely the sanctions that have been issued against our Palestinian colleagues on the one hand, and the restrictions placed on the human rights work of our US colleagues on the other hand, are the biggest challenges to the ICC's history. We must work to overcome them, not just today, not just tomorrow, not even next year, but for an unknowable long haul. We must stand to support each other, state, civil society and the court, and work together to find sustainable ways to shore its foundations. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank the coalition for the statement. And next speaker is Ms. Hanna Rasamakina, Media Initiative for Human, on behalf of Zemina, ULAC, MIR, and other NGOs from the Ukraine 5 a.m. coalition. You have the floor.
Madam President, thank you for this opportunity. In 2025, attacks, political pressure, and challenges faced by the International Criminal Court have reached an unprecedented level. Beyond institutional limitations, budgetary constraints, and an overwhelming workload, the court now confronts instances of non-cooperation, threats of withdrawal from the Rome Statute, and the imposition of sanctions. These developments raise deep concern regarding the court's ability to fulfill its mandate, a mandate recognized and protected by 125 state parties. Despite these challenges, the ICC remains the only permanent international criminal tribunal capable of ensuring accountability for crimes of the highest gravity. For victims and affected communities worldwide, the court embodies hope when other jurisdictions are unable or unwilling to prosecute those responsible for atrocity crimes. The situation in Ukraine demonstrates the necessity of a resilient ICC. Since Russia's full-scale invasion in 2022, numerous mechanisms have been activated to pursue accountability for conflict-related violations. Yet, nearly 4 years on, they remain inherently limited in addressing the crimes that fall under the ICC's unique mandate, as the violations continue to amass, creating further challenges for justice. Since 2022, the court has issued 6 arrest warrants against senior Russian officials, reflecting its unique capacity to hold top leaders responsible. Where crimes of this gravity are not effectively investigated and persecuted, an impunity gap emerges. The absence of real consequences emboldens those who order, enable, or commit international crimes and signals that such conduct may continue without meaningful accountability. This lack of deterrence directly endangers lives. It increases the risk of further attacks on civilians and of new cycles of violence in Ukraine and beyond. A weakening of the ICC, whether through political attacks, underfunding, or threats of sanctions, undermines the global system of accountability and leaves victims without access to justice. It also removes a critical deterrent to the commission of further crimes. For Ukraine and for the world, a strong ICC is not merely a legal necessity, but a security guarantee. A mechanism that deters further atrocities by ensuring that those who order, enable, or commit them cannot escape responsibility. We are concerned that the current pressures may hinder the court's ability to maintain the pace and visibility of its efforts in Ukraine following the opening of the investigation in 2022. Continued, consistent action is essential to preserve trust in the institution and to demonstrate its indispensable role in addressing the gravest crimes. Therefore, the ICC requires decisive political, financial, and diplomatic support from all stakeholders, and above all from state parties to the Rome Statute. Their commitment is crucial to safeguarding and strengthening an institution that embodies the hope for justice not only for Ukrainian victims, but for victims worldwide, and to ensuring that impunity does not continue to put lives at risk. We call on state parties to provide sustainable funding to the ICC to ensure that budgetary constraints do not limit its ability to investigate and prosecute core international crimes. Publicly and consistently defend the court's independence against political pressure, attacks, sanctions, and attempts to undermine its mandate. strengthen diplomatic support for the ICC, including responding to threats of withdrawal from the Rome Statute and to measures aimed at obstructing the court's work. Ensure the enforcement of arrest obligations, including taking action when ICC fugitives, such as President Putin, travel to state parties without being arrested, in order to uphold the integrity of the Rome Statute system. Support continued visible progress in the Ukraine situation, recognizing the importance of the 6 arrest warrants issued against senior Russian officials and the court's unique ability to pursue those most responsible. Promote complementarity and coordination between the ICC and other accountability mechanisms, ensuring a coherent and comprehensive justice response for victims. Uphold victim-centered justice, including meaningful participation and communication with affected communities. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your statement, and I give floor to Mr. George Musipazipa, representing Colombe de la Nature.
Madame la Présidente de l'Assemblée des États partis, qu'il me soit permis de vous manifester au nom de Colombe de la Nature, CEDEN en sigle, œuvrant en République démocratique du Congo, toutes nos vives félicitations pour votre désignation ainsi qu'à toute votre équipe à la tête de cette 24e session de l'Assemblée des États partis du statut de Rome de la Cour pénale internationale. Notre organisation salue également tous les participants et leur souhaite un fructueux travail durant notre session. Mesdames, Messieurs, CEDEN, notre organisation de protection des droits de l'homme et de l'environnement, a des préoccupations qu'elle voudrait partager avec vous afin de trouver le juste droit pour des millions de victimes de violences, de guerre, et cela en faveur de la paix et de la justice dans le monde. Notre intervention s'articulera sur 4 points que nous trouvons prioritaires pour nous. Il s'agit des droits de l'homme dans mon pays, la République démocratique du Congo, qui est très inquiétante et requiert une attention particulière du fait de la guerre d'agression par le Rwanda et des rébellions qu'il a nommément créées dans la partie est de la République démocratique du Congo, qui a vu la suite d'une série de violations des droits de l'homme continuées, causant depuis près de 30 ans des génocides qui n'est plus à démontrer, ni à ignorer, ni à mettre en doute si on s'en tient aux définitions actuelles et récentes de ce concept. Nous rappelons que les agresseurs, une rébellion dénommée M23 AFC, soutenue par le Rwanda, et à la recherche des minerais pour des pays du monde occidental et des multinationales toujours occidentales, ne lésinent pas sur les moyens pour tuer, violer, mutiler, affamer et détruire en utilisant parfois des enfants soldats dans leur sale besogne. Nous sollicitons ici que cette Assemblée puisse contribuer d'une manière ou d'une autre à faire stopper ce génocide en République démocratique du Congo pour sauver des milliers de victimes. Aussi, devons-nous dire que nous nous opposons aux sanctions des dirigeants de la nouvelle administration américaine contre la Cour en général et aux autorités qui la dirigent. L'attitude de bloquer la Cour pénale internationale en s'attaquant à ses responsables est infondée, irresponsable et inadmissible. Nous devrions tous, à notre avis, chercher à inventer ce qui peut être une solution médiane ou alors palliatives à cette situation, à cette crise. Quant au volet lié à la coopération et à la complémentarité, nous voulons sortir de la sphère des États parce que d'autres en ont parlé ici. Et nous proposons des réflexions, des discussions sur une coopération et une complémentarité judiciaire entre la CPI et la CIG, donc la Cour pénale internationale et la Cour internationale de justice. C'est trop technique, mais cela devrait concerner des crimes d'agression. Pareille prise de position permettra d'avoir une stratégie judiciaire commune de poursuite entre ces deux institutions judiciaires internationales en ce qui concerne les dirigeants des pays qui sont supposés être pénalement responsables des abus dans des pays tiers. Enfin, nous nous associons à tous ceux qui ont fait l'appel de voir les amendements de Kampala progresser vers une harmonisation des points de vue des États partis afin que les victimes ne soient plus ignorées par cette justice qui semble tourner à deux vitesses. Ce n'est pas une discussion vaine, car les victimes, il y en a, et on n'a plus droit de trop attendre, car les morts et les victimes vivantes sont en train de suivre son bonhomme de chemin. Soyons compatissants avec toutes ces victimes et trouvons vite des compromis pour que les uns et les autres, nous ayons la même compréhension pour le bien de l'humanité. Je vous remercie.
Je vous remercie. And the next speaker is Ms. Noor Khalifa, representing Libya Crimes Watch and Lawyers for Justice in Libya. You have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen, I speak to you today on behalf of Libya Crimes Watch, Lawyers for Justice in Libya, and Libyan civil society, in the hopes to convey voices of victims and affected communities in Libya. Through our work in monitoring and documenting, we see every day how the same patterns of international crimes continue unabated. Day after day, year after year, we face a heavy catalog of violations, including arbitrary arrests, torture, enforced disappearance, extrajudicial killings, and the targeting of civil society. These violations are committed by security and military actors affiliated with the de facto authorities in Libya, whether it was in eastern Libya or in the west, with the government of national unity, to the point where impunity has become the rule rather than the exception. For example, since 2024, LCW have documented more than 60 incidents of extrajudicial killings, including cases involving children, resulting from torture, medical neglect, and indiscriminate shellings. And in May, at least 12 civilians were killed during clashes in Tripoli due to the use of heavy weaponry in densely populated areas. More than 70 civilians, including at least 10 women, also remain forcibly disappeared, and since November 2024, following a widespread arrest campaign in eastern Libya over accusations related to witchcraft and sorcery. Serious violations amounting to international crimes continue inside both official and unofficial presence in East and the West, particularly in Grenada, El Kuwaifia, and Ma'itiga prison, where civilians, and including activists and human rights defenders, are held for years without trial. As for migrants, they face extremely harsh and inhumane conditions. They are subjected to systematic incitement and hate campaigns orchestrated and encouraged by the authorities, as well as mass arbitrary arrests, mass enforced disappearances, human trafficking, violence, and sexual assault. security bodies and armed groups have turned this file into a source of profit, detaining migrants and extorting their families for ransom for exchange for their release. Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, amid this bleak reality, the court's work in recent months have been the genuine source of hope. The issuance of new arrest warrants and the arrest of the accused Khalid al-Hishri have restored some measure of confidence for victims. But this hope remains fragile unless further steps towards accountability are taken. To this day, and despite the Libyan authorities' declaration of accepting the court's jurisdictions under Article 12.3 of the Rome Statute, and despite Libya's existing obligations under Security Council Resolution 1970, authorities in both East and the West in Libya have not surrendered a single individual wanted by the court, including Osama Njem and Saif Sneedel. This reflects an apparent absence of genuine cooperation and shows that the steps taken so far have not gone beyond symbolic measures. At the same time, the Libyan judicial system remains unable and unwilling to hold those responsible for international crimes to account. It lacks independence, as well as the laws, procedures, and fundamental safeguards necessary for justice, rendering the application of the principle of complementarity unrealistic and unattainable in practice. As a result, victims are left with no avenue for redress other than the International Criminal Court. In light of these realities, the Libyan civil society put forward these recommendations. We call on state parties and the court to use all available pressure to ensure that the Libyan authorities translate the acceptance of the court's jurisdictions into genuine cooperation steps that guarantees the surrender of all individuals sought by the court without exception. We also urge the Office of the Prosecutor to continue its investigations without being bound to rigid timelines. And we further urge the court to issue additional arrest warrants against high officials implicated in international crimes committed in Libya. We recommend that the court reconsiders how the principle of complementarity is applied in the Libyan context. Given the absence of political will and the lack of independence and the structural deficiencies of the Libyan judiciary, which renders national justice systems and pathways currently just unenforceable. Ladies and gentlemen, Madam President, victims and affected communities in Libya have nothing to hold on except the hope represented by this court. Every step taken here has a direct impact on how close they are to achieving the justice they have waited so many years for. And I leave you on that note. Thank you very much for giving me the time.
I thank you for your statement, and I give now floor to Mr. Rodrigo Diamanti, representing Un Mundo Sin Mordaza. You have the floor.
Dear members of the Assembly of the International Criminal Court, my name is Rodrigo Diamanti, and I am a Venezuelan and a former political prisoner. And I want to say something honest. I want to apologize first to the victims of Venezuela because this system, the one we trusted, failed them when they needed the most. I carry that truth with me every day with a lot of pain. And today I want to share a story that I live. One morning in the streets of The Hague, I encountered Prosecutor Karim Khan. I introduced myself and he said, "Actually, I'm going next week to Venezuela." I replied, "I hope you can do as much as possible for the Venezuelan victims." He nodded and added, "Let me introduce you. This is my sister-in-law." At the time, it felt harmless, but months later, I saw her again, not beside him, but in front of him, inside the court. Not as family, but as a counsel representing the very regime he was accusing. How can the prosecutor accuse a regime on one side of the courtroom while a member of his own family defends the same regime at the court? First, he traveled twice to Caracas to shake hands with the perpetrator and sign an MOU, but seeing his sister-in-law defending the regime crossed a moral line for all of us. And dear Assembly, Venezuela never deserved this. We earned better. For years, since 2014 and 2017, systematic violence escalated and the court remained silent. We gathered evidence, we mapped the chain of command, and we pushed for the creation of the panel of experts at the OAS and the fact-finding mission at the United Nations. We also secured something unprecedented, a referral by 6 states parties for the first time in history. And when they were consulted, more than 8,000 victims participated with this court. But here lies the tragic irony. When the investigation was finally opened, the court fell into silence. As repression reached its worst levels, as the repression reached the worst levels in our history. And the question is simple: why the worst surge of repression coincide with the opening of the investigation? And the answer is this one: because the prosecutor adopted a dual-track approach. Dialogue without enforcement, engagement without consequence. According to the panel of experts, after the investigation was opened, torture increased by 150%, and enforced disappearance by 105%. And for the first time in a decade, 170 minors and more than 300 women were in prison. And just in 48 hours after the elections, at least 25 people were killed and more than 200,000 were detained, fulfilling the bloodbath that Nicolás Maduro had publicly promised weeks before. And despite this public threat, and despite the execution of that threat, the court remained silent, and the prosecutor remained silent. Dear delegates, I'm not here only to denounce. I'm here to ask for the minimum needed to protect lives in Venezuela. First, the prosecutor must speak publicly and consistently about the crimes being committed. Second, the court must issue arrest warrants in the Venezuelan situation and publicly confirm their existence. Names are not required. Acknowledgement is essential. This will send an important message to the victims that they are not alone, and to the perpetrators that they are not longer safe. Without voice, without warrants, there is no protection. And without protection, there is no justice. Venezuela cannot endure another decade of silence. It's time for this court to become what it was created to be: a line of protection against state terror. As Juan Pablo Pernalete's parents said to me one day, crime against humanity may not expire, but human lives do, like the life of his son murdered by the Nicolás Maduro regime. And I hope that one day I can stand here in front of all of you, not to apologize to the victims, but to thank this court because we finally found justice for all of them. Y a las víctimas de Venezuela les digo, gracias por seguir luchando por la justicia, que estoy seguro que gracias a ustedes algún día llegará. Thank you very much.
I thank you for your statement. And next speaker is Mr. Raji Al-Surani, representing Al-Haq, Al-Mezan, and Palestinian Center for Human Rights. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madame the President, ladies and gentlemen. Today, in Gaza, the situation, business as usual. I mean, the genocide continuing, the war crimes, the crimes against humanity, persecution, and all kinds of violations happening at that part of the world. In the eye of the storm, civilians and civilian targets. We have the massive killing, we have the massive destruction, the famine, and the massive displacement. In the last couple of months, two things has been concluded, led by US and many other countries: ceasefire. On the ground, it doesn't exist, and even Security Council resolution for adoption of Trump plan for peace, it's non-existence. The unfolded genocide, unfolded ethnic cleansing, continuing non-stop. We engaged with the ICC since 2008, and Palestine became as a member since 2015, January. And we invested our best, and ICC do have the most well-documented conflict in modern history, though they are denied access to the theater and the crime, whether in Gaza, West Bank, or Jerusalem. Right now, we, after 2 years and 2 months, sanctioned as human rights organizations who provide full cooperation, legal documentation, evidence for the ICC. They are almost the only channel who do provide ICC with that. And now we are designated, we are sanctioned by the Treasury to dry up resources and not be able to continue the mission we are having. This is not only related to Palestinian human rights organizations, whether in Gaza or in the West Bank, but it's related to the ICC directly. This comes in a situation where prosecutors were designated and punished, judges designated and punished. It's Palestine, and it's the pain and suffering of Palestinians. It's Israel, where it's feeling fully immune, supported legally, politically, and through sanctioning judges, prosecutors, and Palestinian human rights organizations who are representing and defending and cooperating with the ICC. The threat, it's not for Gaza, it's not for Palestine. The threat for the very existence of the ICC. There is a real serious attempt to assassinate rule of law, the very existence of the ICC. And if they succeed in that, they will succeed in many other cases. That's why I'm appalled and shocked, honestly, by most of the states who are at the ASP, who didn't address this precise issue and confronted this attempt of imposing sanctions, of paralyzing the ICC. And as it has been said before, the target not only bunch of judges and lawyers and prosecutors who are working on Palestine and providing more immunity for genocidal state and its partners. But it's beyond that, the attempt to silence the rule of law. I appeal for you, Mr. President, and Madam President, and for the ASP to take this matter, the attack on judiciary, the attack on prosecutors, judges, and defenders of victims as top priority. If we allow the rule of jungle to prevail, then we are compromising the entire existence of the most important criminal court on earth. We are facing mighty country, strong country, but never ever we have to give up the hope, and we have to stand for a challenge, and we have to keep the strategic optimism all the way in struggle for justice and dignity for victims in Palestine and elsewhere. A few days ago coincided the 80th anniversary of Nuremberg trials. Accountability, it's not a fun, it's not academic experience, it's not intellectual discussion. It's bringing people to the justice they deserve and bringing justice and dignity for victims who suffer these atrocities. Thank you, Madam President.
I thank for your statement, and I give floor to Ms. Ayman Seafielding, International Community Care EV. You have the floor.
Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues, we meet at the 24th session of the Assembly of State Parties at critical juncture for the International Criminal Court and for my country, Sudan, which today endures what has been described as the world's most severe humanitarian catastrophe. As international crimes intensify, the court faces unprecedented political, operational, and institutional threats that jeopardize its ability to deliver justice when it's most needed. I express my deep respect for the judges, Office of the Prosecutor, ICC staff, who uphold justice despite immense challenges, as well as Palestinian civil society organizations, whose documentation of crimes assures victims that accountability can prevail. Sanctions against ICC officials and human rights defenders are an attack on justice and raise serious concerns about the politicizing of international accountability. The court's independence is foundational and must be preserved through cooperation and respect for victims. Concurrently, the withdrawal of the three Sahel states and Hungary from the Rome Statute undermines the universality, especially as civilians in the Sahel endure significant insecurity due to terrorist actions by various armed extremist factions, compounded by severe climate pressure. Additionally, the finding of non-compliance by other states further diminish collective efficiency. In Darfur, ineffective enforcement of arrest warrants and prolonged delays have enabled genocide and starvation campaigns to continue. 2 decades of waiting have aggravated victims' suffering, while absence of charges for gender-based crimes and crimes against children has left justice incomplete. Madam President, the delay in prosecuting crimes committed since 2004 has worsened the ongoing conflict in Darfur, allowing perpetrators for war crimes and crimes against humanity to spread their atrocities to other parts of Sudan. Victims have called for the court's jurisdictions to be extended to include all Sudan. The spillover into neighboring countries has caused mayhem and violence across the region. The postponement has resulted in more life loss than the referral itself, deepening the suffering of victims who have waited 20 years for justice. Over the years, I have been a dedicated advocate for international justice, and it is disheartening to think I might have to tell the victims that my efforts have been in vain. Survivors of rape, sexual slavery, and children subjected to hunger and forced recruitment have not seen their experiences fully reflected in the proceedings. Meanwhile, slavery and slave markets have flourished. Women have been sold, traded, and subjected to ransom demands, while sexual violence has been systematically deployed as a weapon of war. These crimes are centered to victims' lives, experiences, and must be treated as such during prosecution. Today, Sudan is engulfed in proxy war, fueled by several external actors supplying RSF militias with weapons in breach of the UN arms embargo. This enabled genocidal campaign against Masalit community in El Geneina. The tragedy was compounded by the siege of El Fasher, which lasted for 18 months. During these attacks, more than 460 civilians were reportedly executed in the maternity hospital. These atrocities occur because international justice was not supported, leaving victims exposed and perpetrators supported. Yet, despite 2 decades of waiting, the victims of Darfur continue supporting international justice because, in their understanding, it is the only path to lasting peace as we continue to advocate for the cause despite the delay. The resilience of the victims must inspire the Assembly to act urgently and resolutely. Despite these challenges, the ICC has advanced in mandate. The conviction of Ali Muhammad Ali Abdurrahman Kosheb in Darfur marks the court's first conviction of war crimes referred by the UN Security Council. In the Central African Republic, the conviction of Alfred Yakatom and Beatrice Edward recognized the responsibility of the anti-Bakala commanders. The confirmation of charges against Joseph Kony, even in absentia, was a long-awaited step for thousands of Ugandan victims. The arrest of former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte and Germany's surrender of a Libyan suspect show that cooperation can deliver accountability even in the most difficult context. As I conclude, I urge the state parties to advance amendments that enshrine ecocide as a prosecutable crime under the ICC jurisdiction, ensuring accountability for those who deliberately devastating the environment and thereby jeopardize the future of humanity. Protecting ecosystem is indispensable for protecting victims, inseparable from protecting victims, and without it, justice remains incomplete. Excellencies, I urge this Assembly to stand for the ICC in the face of sanctions, defend its independence, neutrality, and impartiality, deliver on commitment to victims' rights, reflect their experiences in proceedings and reparations. strengthening cooperation, enforce arrest warrants, and uphold the obligations of state parties enshrined in the Rome Statute. Advance accountability within the ICC, embody integrity, transparency, and solidarity from within. Ensure comprehensive justice in Darfur and beyond. Prosecute gender crimes, crimes against children, slavery, and sexual slavery fully. The ICC remains the last bridge for many survivors of genocide, war crimes, and gender-based violence to cross to find their next chance, freedom and lasting peace. Silence and delay are complicity, and neutrality is betrayal. Let us leave The Hague, the city of peace, with a renewed commitment to defend the court, protect victims' rights, and restore hope to those who have endured the gravest crimes and have waited for too long for justice. I thank you, Madam President.
I thank you for your statement. The interpreters have extended their services beyond the normal time. I thank the interpreters. We have to release them. We still have 3 more speakers, which I propose that we would continue to hear tonight so that we could close our general debate today. Next speaker will be Ms. Momina Yari. She will be speaking on behalf of Afghanistan Human Rights and Democracy Organization, Afghanistan Organization for Development of Human Rights, Afghanistan Transitional Justice Coordination Group, and the Coalition for the Prevention of Hazara Genocide. You have the floor.
Excellencies, Madam President, honorable judges, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. It's an honor to address this assembly on behalf of the Coalition for the Prevention of Hazara Genocide, Afghanistan Organization for Development of Human Rights, Afghanistan Human Rights and Democracy Organization, and Afghanistan Transitional Justice Coordination Group. At the moment, millions of my people are suffering from atrocity crimes such as genocide, persecution, and other crimes against humanity and war crimes in Afghanistan. This cause is a direct result of decades of violence and impunity. Madam President, the Taliban's returns to the power in 2021, worsening the situation. The principles that guide this code in the human society, such as human dignity, equality, and justice, are violated every single day in Afghanistan. Women and girls have been erased from public life. They are banned from secondary school and universities, barred from work, restricted in their movement, and stripped of their most basic rights. This is not isolated discrimination. It is a crime against humanity, of gender persecution, and as human rights advocates say, it is also gender apartheid. We welcome the issuance of arrest warrants against the 2 Taliban leaders and emphasize for more perpetrators. Afghanistan's ethnic and religious minorities and marginalized groups, especially the Hazara community, have faced a pattern of targeted bombings, execution, forced displacement, and attacks on schools, mosques, and places of work. The nature and consistency of some of these atrocity crimes reflect clear indicators outlined in Article 6 of the Rome Statute and the Genocide Convention in amount to genocide. These atrocities must be recognized, stopped, prevented, and investigated with the full weight of the legal and ethical framework governing, addressing, preventing, and punishing genocide. Excellencies, across the country, civilians continue to suffer past and ongoing extrajudicial killings, arbitrary detentions, torture, enforced disappearance, and the destructions of essential infrastructure. These acts, committed by the de facto authorities and various armed groups inside Afghanistan, constitute war crimes and crimes against humanity. Impunity has emboldened perpetrators for over 4 decades. Victims deserve more than sympathy. They deserve actions grounded in international law that put their needs and well-beings at the center of any efforts. Madam President, another urgent concern is the mass deportation of Afghan refugees from neighboring countries, particularly Pakistan and Iran. Women, children, human rights defenders, and members of groups at risk of persecution are being forced back into conditions where their lives are at immediate risk. They need protection. Excellency, Madam President, the situation in Afghanistan and other countries show how much millions of people depend on the international criminal courts of justice. We are deeply concerned about any policies or actions that threaten the court or its officials. Millions of survivors, including my people, are watching this assembly. The court must be protected, and state parties must act swiftly and decisively to defend its independence. Furthermore, I urge this assembly to amend Article 7 of the Rome Statute and codify gender apartheid as a new crime against humanity and recognize the Taliban's anti-women policies and actions as gender persecution and gender apartheid. This is really not a story. It is really happening inside Afghanistan by the Taliban regime, barring women from all activities inside Afghanistan. They are banning women from every social activities. And to fully cooperate with the OTP investigation and implementation of arrest warrants. 2, recognize genocide committed against Hazara and support investigation into this genocidal campaign against the Hazara community. And put measures in place to protect the community and prevent and stop genocide of Hazara community. 3, ensure continuity, independence, and impartiality of the ICC by providing protection to the ICC as an institution and to staff from sanctions. Excellencies, despite immense suffering, the Afghan people have not abandoned hope. Afghan women continue to resist with extraordinary courage. Afghan youth continue to dream of a future built on rights and freedom. Human rights defenders continue their work at great personal risk. If Afghan women, silenced, banned, and imprisoned, still find the strength to speak, then the international community has no excuse to remain silent. I ask this assembly to let our collective voice today be a source of strength for those who cannot be here. Thank you, Madam President, for your attention.
Thank you for your statement. And the second last speaker will be Mr. Vincent Kimati Mutora, representing the Kenyan section of the International Commission of Jurists. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm honored to address the honorable delegates and observers. I take this opportunity to thank the Assembly for taking time to allow organizations to contribute to the debate on the various issues of our deliberations. As you deliberate on these issues, it is important to reaffirm the foundational principle of the Rome Statute, the absolute independence and impartiality of the International Criminal Court. We remind all state parties and the broader international community that safeguarding the ICC independence is not only a legal obligation, but a moral imperative central to the global fight against impunity. We are equally gravely concerned by the worsening atrocities and humanitarian sufferings in Sudan, where civilians continue to endure widespread and systematic violence. These serious crimes require urgent and resolute action. We call on the ICC to accelerate its investigative and prosecutorial efforts regarding the situation in Sudan and to focus on ensuring accountability for the most responsible. We also urge state parties, especially governments in the region, to fully cooperate with the court, facilitate unhindered access, and support all necessary measures to secure justice for victims who have already waited for far too long. We further draw the Assembly's attention to the concerning reports from Tanzania regarding the human rights situation before, during, and after the recent electoral period. Civil society organizations and independent observers have documented allegations of excessive use of force, arbitrary arrests, enforced disappearances, and incidents resulting in the killing of civilians in Tanzania. We respectively urge the International Criminal Court to closely monitor the situation and where the legal thresholds under the Rome Statute appear to be met, to consider preliminary assessment into these allegations. We also call on the court to engage with the relevant stakeholders to ensure that any serious violations do not go unaddressed, and that accountability mechanisms are available to victims whose rights may have been gravely infringed. As the Assembly gathers in this session, we echo the call for state parties to reaffirm their political, diplomatic, and practical support for the ICC. Now more than ever, it is vital that states collectively defend the court from external interference and ensure that its officials can carry out their duties free from threats, pressure, or reprisals. The Kenyan section of the International Commission of Jurists commends the International Criminal Court and its officials for their steadfast commitment to justice and accountability in the face of unprecedented challenges during the intersessional period. We urge the Assembly to adopt concrete measures that, one, condemn and counteracts any counteracts of intimidation or coercion against court officials and those cooperating with the ICC. Two, reaffirm the collective commitment to the independence of the court and the universality of the Rome Statute. And state parties, especially those in the African region, should strengthen and demonstrate full cooperation with the ICC in relation to the situation in Sudan. In closing, as I close, the Kenyan section of the International Commission of Juries stands in full solidarity with the court, its officials, and all who contribute to its work. We remain guided by the shared vision of a world where justice is not selective and accountability is not an option. I thank you.
I thank you for your statement. And the last speaker, but not the least, will be Ms. Luna Andersen-Frank, representing Eco Justice. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is my honour to speak to you today on behalf of EcoJustice.Earth, formerly known as Stop Ecocide Netherlands, and as a new member of the Coalition for the ICC. We stand at a pivotal moment in history where the scale of environmental destruction and the corresponding existential threat to life demands a legal response equal to its gravity. The history of severe ecological harm serves as our shared warning. From the use of Agent Orange in Vietnam and the catastrophic Kuwait oil fires during conflict, and emerging peacetime threats such as the strategic depletion of transboundary water resources and deep-sea mining. These acts reveal a pattern of systemic impunity that undermines human security and planetary stability. At EcoJustice, we recognize the power of criminal law to delineate what is morally acceptable. As such, we acknowledge the criminalization of severe and either widespread or long-term environmental damage, or ecocide, as imperative to recognizing the associated moral transgressions. Our mission is clear: to shift from exploitation to sustainable coexistence by holding those who perpetrate mass ecological harm to account under the rule of law. Through our flagship campaign, Generation EcoJustice, we provide the necessary legal groundwork and advocacy to accelerate the global movement for environmental justice, ensuring it becomes broader and deeper in scope. It's in this spirit that we call on the international justice community to embrace long-term, principled accountability for the planet that we share. Nature teaches us that survival is a story written in generations. If we are to honor that truth, our decisions must echo beyond the present. Across the globe, we're beginning to see glimmers of this vision in action. States experimenting with stronger criminal accountability for environmental destruction. In Europe, for example, the Environmental Crimes Directive is pushing the boundaries of criminal law in setting new standards for prosecuting environmental crimes, including particularly serious offences akin to ecocide. In this regard, the ICC is also on the verge of an important development. The Office of the Prosecutor has undertaken a comprehensive review into whether it's already possible to address serious environmental damage under the existing crimes in the Rome Statute. The resulting policy paper, which the prosecutor will launch on December the 4th at the ASP, could be another breakthrough for global environmental justice. We wholeheartedly support this development, and if, according to the OTP, the Rome Statute can indeed be leveraged for these cases, then we, as Generation EcoJustice, will actively implement the framework established by the Office in our field of work. Consistent with this commitment, our input into the consultation on the policy paper last February urged the inclusion of cultural heritage among the policy's key terms, the expansion of paragraph 29 of the draft policy paper on assessing the gravity of environment-specific factors, and address the processing of communications filed pursuant to Article 15 of the Rome Statute. This would be a landmark step, but we must nevertheless continue to recognize the necessity of addressing legislative gaps. While some countries are making positive steps, there is no unified international response to the most egregious acts of environmental destruction in both times of peace and conflict. Madam President, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the future will judge not by intentions, but by actions, and by whether we, as a global community, had the courage to prosecute environmental harm with the seriousness it demands. Together, we can transform criminal law into a powerful tool for ecological accountability, and not just to punish, but to prevent and to restore. Future generations will come to ask, did we act when we had the chance? Let our answer be yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. And that brings us to the end of our general debate. I would like to thank all the speakers for all their statements presented during the general debate agenda item and for the support pledged to the court, its officials, to the Secretariat, to the Presidency of the Assembly. And I thank you all also for answering to my call to address in this general debate the thematic theme, concrete measures to strengthen the ICC. I will declare now the agenda item 7, general debate closed, and I wish you all pleasant evening. And that, unless there are any requests for the floor, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you.